You walk through the dark, quiet streets toward the Stabian Gate, the stone pavement cool and smooth under your leather sandals. The torch you carry flickers with a soft orange glow that pushes back the darkness in a small shifting circle around you. High walls of houses and shops rise on either side, their shuttered windows blank and black. The only sound is the scuff of your own footsteps and the faint whisper of the flame. You turn a corner and see the gate ahead, a high arch of heavy stone blocks fitted without mortar, its two square towers standing solid against the deep night sky. The stars are sharp and clear overhead, thousands of tiny points of light fixed in their familiar patterns. You approach the small pedestrian door set into the larger gate and see the guard you were to relieve leaning against the wall with his spear at rest. He straightens as you draw near, and the two of you exchange a quiet nod in the dimness, your faces half lit by the torch in its iron bracket on the wall. You pass your own torch to him so he can find his way back through the city, and he hands you his spear, the wooden shaft smooth from long use, the iron head cool to the touch. He says something low about the watch being calm and nothing stirring, his words already half absorbed by the silence. Then he turns and walks away down the empty street, his figure shrinking until the torchlight is just a bobbing orange dot that rounds a corner and disappears. Now you are alone at the gate. You settle the spear against the stone wall beside you and let your eyes adjust to the darkness after the departing light. The main gate is a massive wooden structure, reinforced with iron bands and held shut by a heavy horizontal bar that sits in deep stone sockets. The pedestrian door beside it is closed and bolted, a smaller rectangle of oak with a simple iron ring for a handle. The gate arch frames a view of the countryside road that leads away into the farmlands, but at this hour, everything beyond is a uniform black. You cannot see the mountain Vesuvius, or the vineyards, or the distant villas. The night has swallowed them all. The torch in its bracket burns with a steady flame that rarely flutters because the air is so still. It casts a warm amber glow on the stone arch overhead, leaving the higher reaches of the tower in shadow. The stone itself is a pale tufa, rough and porous, cool against your palm when you touch it. You begin your watch by simply standing and listening. The silence is so complete that at first you hear only a faint ringing in your own ears. Then, gradually, you become aware of the softer sounds underneath the silence. A fountain somewhere deeper in the city trickles water into a basin, a distant musical murmur that has been playing for years without pause. The torch makes a soft crackling sound, the flame eating the oil-soaked cloth with a gentle hiss. Your own breathing is slow and even, the breath passing through your nose with a quietness you never noticed during the busy daytime. There is a sense of the whole city breathing around you in its sleep, a vast, slow rhythm of rest that holds every house and street and temple. You shift your weight from one leg to the other and feel the slight discomfort in your lower back, the familiar ache of a long stand. The wool of your tunic is coarse against your shoulders, and the leather belt around your waist creaks when you move. You roll your head slowly to release the tension in your neck and look up at the stars through the open rectangle of the gate arch. The constellation you know as the Wagon tilts low toward the western rooftops, its 4 bright stars forming a box with a trailing handle. You have watched it many nights from this same spot, marking the slow hours by its gradual descent. Nothing moves up there, yet everything moves. The sky is a great clock that marks the passage of time without sound or haste. A cat appears from a narrow alley between a wine shop and a bakery, its shape a low shadow slipping over the paving stones. It pauses in the middle of the street, one paw lifted, and turns its head to look at you with eyes that reflect the torchlight as 2 small green sparks. The two of you regard each other for a long moment in which nothing happens. Then the cat continues on its way, vanishing into the darkness under a cart parked against a wall. The street returns to emptiness. The cobblestones, large irregular polygons of dark basalt, gleam faintly where the torchlight touches them, their surfaces worn smooth by countless cartwheels and sandals over the decades. You pour a little water from the small clay flask tied to your belt, tilting it to your lips so the cool liquid runs slowly over your tongue and down your dry throat. The water tastes faintly of the earthen jar it was stored in. You replace the stopper carefully and wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. The night air is cool but not cold. It carries the dry scent of dust and old stone and a faint salty hint of the distant sea that lies beyond the plain. Sometimes, on windy nights, you can smell the sulfur from the hot springs near the mountain, but tonight the air is clean and neutral. You walk a slow circuit of your post, moving from the gate along the inner face of the city wall for 100 paces, then back again. The wall rises high above you, a formidable barrier of stone blocks that protects the city from nothing in particular during these peaceful years. Your sandals make a soft scuffing sound on the packed earth beside the stone pavement, a rhythm of 4 steps, turn, 4 steps, turn, 4 steps, turn. At the far end of your circuit, you pause to look out through a narrow observation slit in the wall, a vertical gap just wide enough for a man's face. The countryside lies invisible beyond, an imagined landscape of farms and olive groves and dark fields. The mountain Vesuvius rises as a deeper blackness against the sky, a bulky silhouette with a distinctive flat top and sloping shoulders. It is just a mountain to you, a familiar part of the view you have seen since childhood, covered with vineyards and farms on its fertile lower slopes. You hold no suspicions about it. After a minute of looking at the unchanging dark, you turn and walk back to the gate, resuming your place beside the torch. The deep hours of the night stretch on, slower than any daytime hour. You have learned to let your mind drift without falling asleep, a kind of half-awake state where thoughts come and go like clouds. You think about the meal you will eat after your watch, a bowl of barley porridge with olive oil and maybe a piece of cheese. You think about the small room in the barracks, where your cot waits, a straw mattress and a wool blanket, a shelf with your spare tunic. You do not think about anything urgent or important. Your thoughts are simple, practical, unhurried. The gate before you is a solid presence, and your duty is to stand beside it. There is comfort in the simplicity. The flame of the torch dips suddenly. Flame of the torch dips suddenly, flaring low as a breath of wind slips through the gate's iron grate. You look up and see the stars blurred slightly at their edges, a high, thin haze moving in from the sea. The breeze touches your face for a moment, cool and soft, and then dies away. The flame steadies. You check the supply of spare torches in the niche carved into the wall, 3 of them standing upright in a stone holder, their tops wrapped in oil-soaked rags, enough to last until dawn without issue. The iron bracket that holds the current torch is black with soot, the stone behind it stained with a long vertical smear of smoke. You trace the smear with your finger, the carbon coming away on your skin like fine black dust. Time moves in its silent way, measured only by the changing angle of the stars, by the slow cooling of the air toward the coldest hour just before dawn. You notice that the fountain you have been hearing all night has become part of your awareness, a constant gentle sound that you only notice when your attention drifts toward it. It is the water spilling from a bronze spout shaped like a lion's head into a rectangular stone basin, the basin overflowing into a drainage channel that runs along the street. The sound is uninterrupted, a liquid silver thread in the fabric of the night. You remember drinking from that fountain during the hot afternoons, cupping your hands under the cool stream while the sun hammered down on the paving stones. Now the fountain is a companion to your stillness, a voice that asks no response. Your body settles deeper into the watch. The initial alertness fades into a calm, steady patience. You lean your shoulder against the cool stone of the arch and let your gaze travel slowly over the details of the street you have memorized long ago. The faded red lettering on the wall of the fuller's shop, the chipped corner of the stepping stone at the intersection, the iron ring set into the pavement for tethering horses. These details are like old friends, unchanging, always there. The night holds everything in a gentle suspension, a pause between days. The cat returns, or perhaps it is a different cat, another shadow slipping along the base of the wall. It does not pause this time, but continues directly to the fountain, where it leaps onto the stone rim and drinks from the overflowing water with quick laps of its tongue. You watch the small animal drink, its silhouette sharp against the faint gleam of the water. After it has finished, it sits on the rim and washes its face with a paw, the motion unhurried and complete. You feel a quiet kinship with this creature that shares the night with you, each of you awake while the world sleeps. The cat finishes its grooming, jumps down, and disappears into the alley from which it came. The fountain continues its murmur. You roll your shoulders and stretch your arms above your head, feeling the joints pop softly. The spear remains leaning against the wall, within easy reach, but you have not needed to touch it for any reason other than to move it from one side to the other. Your duty is not to fight, but to be present. To be the eyes that watch the gate during the hours when the city is vulnerable in its sleep. Nothing will happen, and that is the point. You are a piece of the city's nighttime architecture, as reliable as the stone itself. The thought does not bore you. It reassures you. A quiet city is a safe city. The torch burns down another inch, the flame sinking closer to the iron bracket. You take a fresh torch from the niche, dip its oil-soaked head into the old flame until it catches with a soft pop, and then set the new torch into the bracket. The old one you extinguish by pressing its burning end against the stone until the flame goes out, releasing a thin wisp of white smoke that curls upward and vanishes. The new flame burns brighter for a moment, taller and more yellow, before settling into the same steady orange glow as before. The ritual of replacing the torch is a small marker of time passing, a duty within a duty. You return the spent torch to the niche, where it will cool and be re-soaked in oil by the day guard. You look east, toward the mountains, and see the first faint suggestion of change. Not light yet, but a thinning of the darkness, a softening of the horizon where sky meets land. It is the merest hint, so subtle that you might be imagining it, but you have seen too many dawns from this gate to doubt it. The night is beginning its slow retreat. The stars near the horizon have lost some of their sharpness, blunted by the atmosphere that is beginning to gather the first photons of the coming sun. You fold your arms and watch the east with patient interest, knowing that the transformation will take a long while. Yet, the coldest hour has arrived, the air crisper and cleaner, and your breath forms the faintest ghost of vapor for a moment before disappearing. You take another slow walk along the wall, your footsteps the same rhythm as before. The observation slit reveals the same darkness, but now the outline of Vesuvius has a slightly more defined edge against the sky. It is an illusion of the light, a gradual separation of objects from the uniform black. You can now distinguish the dark mass of trees on the lower slope from the lighter darkness of the open farmland. A single light flickers far out on the plain, a lamp in a farmhouse window. A tiny point of orange like a fallen star. You watch it for a while, but it does not move or change. Someone else is awake, perhaps a farmer preparing for the early market, perhaps a mother tending to a restless child. The distance between you and that light is filled with peaceful emptiness. Returning to the gate, you drink another sip of water and tighten your belt, which is loosened slightly. The silence is still deep, but you notice that the rooster you heard earlier, or another one, has crowed again. The sound distant and thin like a thread pulled across the sky. It is the traditional herald of the final watch, the sign that dawn is truly approaching. Soon the street sweepers will appear with their tweak brooms, and the bakers will open their shops. But for now, the street remains empty, the paving stones grey and still, the torch your only companion. You are content to stand and wait, the spear beside you, the gate closed, the city behind you dreaming its last dreams. The third watch continues in its slow circular rhythm, and you are exactly where you are supposed to be. From your spot at the gate, you can see down the main street that leads toward the Forum, a long corridor of darkness broken only by the pool of torchlight around you. The paving stones are large, dark polygons of basalt, their surfaces polished to a dull gleam by generations of cartwheels and sandaled feet. Deep ruts worn into the stone guide the eye toward the distant heart of the city, parallel grooves filled with shadow. The shops on either side are shuttered tight, their wooden doors set into stone frames and crossed with iron bars, and no light escapes from any crack. A series of raised stepping stones, placed at regular intervals to keep pedestrians above the muck of rainy days, stand like squat pillars in the middle of the street, their tops pale in the dimness. You know every one of them by heart, having stepped on them 1,000 times in daylight, but now they are just dark shapes that mark the steady progress of the street as it recedes into the unseen Forum. The air is completely motionless, and the torch flame rises straight and tall, a spear of yellow-orange light that does not waver. Its glow touches the nearest shopfront, a fuller's workshop identified by a faded painting of a man treading cloth in a vat. the colors muted to earth tones in the low light. Farther along, a wine shop sign, a crude amphora painted in red, hangs from a rusted iron bracket. Nothing stirs. The silence has a physical presence, a weight that presses gently on your ears, and you can hear your own pulse as a soft thud deep within your head, a sound you never noticed during the waking hours. You shift your weight from your left foot to your right and feel the slight creak of your leather belt. The sound small and isolated in the quiet. The wool of your tunic is rough against the skin of your neck, where you shaved that morning, and you reach up to adjust the fabric with a slow, deliberate motion. A cat appears from a narrow alley between the fuller's and the wine shop, its body low and fluid. It moves into the center of the street and pauses directly in the torchlight, where it sits down and wraps its tail around its paws. The cat is a common grey tabby with faint stripes that appear only when the flame catches them at the right angle. It regards you with its unblinking yellow eyes, and you return the gaze without moving. The moment stretches out soft and long, two creatures awake in a sleeping world, until the cat finally blinks, rises, and pads silently toward the fountain you can hear murmuring in the distance. Its departure leaves the street as empty as it was before, a void of grey stone and black shadow. You turn your attention back to the street itself, letting your eyes trace the familiar details that have become like old friends. There is the corner of a brick column that juts out slightly where the bakery begins, a column painted a deep red that has flaked away in patches to reveal the pale terracotta beneath. A bronze door knocker shaped like a clenched fist hangs on a heavy oak door beside the bakery, its surface dark with tarnish. The stepping stones continue their interrupted line into the darkness, and you count them silently to yourself as you have done on many nights, one near the gate, a second at the entrance to the alley, a third beside the fullers, and so on, each one the marker of distance and patience. Your knowledge of these stones is so complete that you could walk the street with your eyes closed and touch each one with your toe at exactly the right moment. Behind you the gate remains shut, its massive wooden bar resting in its stone sockets with the solidity of something that has not moved since it was put in place at sunset. The pedestrian door beside it is bolted, the iron bolt cold and rough under your fingers when you reach back to check it out of habit. The gesture is automatic, a small ritual of reassurance that confirms everything is as it should be. The torch bracket is warm to the touch, its iron heated by the flame it holds, and the stone wall behind it bears the long vertical stain of smoke that has accumulated over months and years. You lean your shoulder against the cool stone of the arch and feel the slight roughness of the tufa through your tunic, a sensation so familiar that it barely registers as a thought. The silence deepens as the night progresses, or perhaps your ears simply grow more accustomed to its layers. You notice now the sound of the fountain more clearly, a gentle spilling of water from a bronze spout into a stone basin, the basin overflowing into a narrow channel that runs along the gutter. The water sounds cool and patient, a liquid voice that has spoken continuously for as long as anyone can remember. You listen to its unchanging note and feel a corresponding stillness settle in your chest. From somewhere far off beyond the rooftops and the darkened forum, an owl calls once, a single low note that hangs in the air for a moment before dissolving. The sound is so brief and distant that you immediately question whether you truly heard it or whether your mind supplied it to fill the void. But the note, or the memory of the note, fades into the silence and leaves no trace. You let your breathing follow its own slow rhythm, in and out through your nose, a quiet tide that does not disturb the peace. The stars continue their slow wheel overhead, the familiar constellations shifting one fraction of a degree at a time. The wagon, which you watched earlier, has now slipped a little lower toward the western rooftops, its four corner stars framing a patch of deep indigo sky. Directly above you, the bright star you know as the Dog Star blazes white and steady, a pinprick of concentrated light. The Milky Way, a faint river of powder, stretches across the zenith from horizon to horizon, visible only when you let your eyes relax and accept its dimness. You look at these stars without thinking about them, simply receiving their light as you have on countless nights since you were a boy learning the patterns from your father on a rooftop outside the city. The stars ask nothing and promise nothing. They're simply there, a background of quiet light. You shift your position slightly, rolling your shoulders to ease the stiffness that has begun to settle between your shoulder blades. The movement causes the spear leaning against the wall to slide a finger's width and tap against the stone with a soft clink of iron on stone. You reach out and steady it without looking, your hand knowing exactly where to find the wooden shaft. The spear is your companion through the watch, a long smooth length of ashwood with a leaf-shaped iron head. You have held this same spear for years, and your hand fits around a particular worn spot just above the grip where the wood has been polished by countless hours of holding. You do not need the spear. You have never needed it, but its presence is part of the duty, a symbol of readiness, in a world that never tests that readiness. The cold of the deepest night is beginning to seep up from the paving stones, a subtle chill that you feel first in your feet. Your sandals are simple leather soles with straps that cross over the instep and around the ankle, and they offer little insulation against the stone. You stamp your feet softly, one then the other. The sound a muffled thud that does not carry far. The movement warms your toes slightly, and you pull your woolen cloak a little tighter around your shoulders. The cloak is a simple rectangle of coarse fabric, undyed and brown, fastened at the right shoulder with a bronze brooch in the shape of a simple disc. You wear it only during the night watches, and it carries the faint smell of cedar from the chest where it is stored during the day. Above the rooftops on the eastern side of the street, a very faint lightening has begun, though it is still far too early to call it dawn. It is merely the first thinning of the absolute blackness, a barely perceptible shift from black to a deep, muted blue. The stars near the horizon have lost their crisp edges and seem to quiver slightly. A phenomenon you know is caused by the atmosphere beginning to bend the light from the still hidden sun. The change is so gradual that you cannot point to any exact moment when it happens. It is a process, not an event, and it will take another hour or more before any true light reaches the street. You watch the east with the patience of a man who has learned that dawn cannot be hurried, that the sun rises at its own appointed time regardless of how eagerly the world awaits it. A second rooster crows somewhere in the city, this one closer than the first, perhaps from a yard behind the bakery. Its call is a ragged, rising note that breaks off abruptly, as if the bird has forgotten why it began. The sound is followed by a brief flutter of wings, audible even from your post, and then silence returns. The rooster's crow is the traditional herald of the changing watches, a natural signal that marks the approach of morning even when the sky has not yet confirmed it. You note the sound and file it away as a small milestone in the long progression of the night. You pour another sip of water from your clay flask, the liquid cool and faintly metallic from the clay. You hold the water in your mouth for a moment before swallowing, letting it moisten the dryness that has gathered on your tongue from breathing the night air for so long. The stopper goes back into the flask with a soft push, and you hang the flask from your belt once more. Your throat feels better, and you clear it quietly, the sound small and contained. The fountain continues its murmur, a sound so constant that it has become almost like another form of silence, a sound you hear only when you choose to hear it. The cat returns, or perhaps it is the same cat, and this time it carries a small object in its mouth, a dark shape that might be a mouse or a scrap of food. It pauses in the same spot under the torchlight, and sets its burden down, inspecting it with a few careful sniffs. You watch without moving, and the cat, after satisfying itself that its prize is what it should be, picks it up again and continues on its way into the shadows. The episode is so brief and so ordinary that it feels like a small gift, a moment of life in the vast stillness. You find yourself smiling slightly, though the expression makes no sound and is gone almost immediately. You now turn your full attention to the sky, where the first true indication of dawn has appeared, a faint grey-yellow seam along the very edge of the eastern horizon, so thin and tentative that a cloud might obscure it entirely. The seam is the first reflected light from the sun, still fully below the curve of the earth, catching the highest atmosphere and scattering downward. It is the promise of morning, a promise that has never been broken in all the history of the world. You watch the seam as it slowly broadens, its color shifting from grey-yellow to a pale, watery gold. The stars directly above you remain bright for now, but the ones lower in the east are fading rapidly, one by one, their light blotted out by the growing luminosity of the sky. The street is slowly revealing itself, as if a veil is being lifted one thread at a time. Details that were hidden in darkness now emerge, the grain of the wooden shutters, the flaking paint on the fuller's sign, the cracks in the stepping stones where iron cartwheels have chipped the edges. The colors are still muted, all grays and blues, but the shapes are distinct now, objects separated from one another by the returning light. You can see the individual weeds growing between the paving stones, small pale green tendrils that struggle for life in the cracks, and you notice that one of the stepping stones has a fresh chip in its corner that was not there the week before. These small discoveries occupy your mind as the light grows, each one a quiet confirmation that the world is still as it was, that the night has passed and left everything in its proper place. You walk your slow circuit again. From the gate along the inner face of the wall, your footsteps the same steady rhythm as always. The observation slit now shows a landscape that is no longer a uniform black, but a patchwork of dark fields and darker trees, with the mountain Vesuvius looming as a solid shape against the paling sky. A thin veil of mist lies over the low ground, a grey-white blanket that will burn off as soon as the sun touches it. The single lamp in the farmhouse still burns, a tiny orange point that seems fainter now against the growing light. You pause at the slit longer than usual, breathing the cool air that flows through the narrow gap, and then turn back toward the gate to complete your circuit. By the time you return to the torch bracket, the sky has brightened enough that the flame seems less necessary, its orange light pale and weak against the natural grey of dawn. You will not need to replace this torch. It will burn down to its end just as the sun clears the horizon, and the day guard will put in a fresh one for his own watch. You lean the spear against the wall and fold your arms, allowing yourself a long, slow exhale that releases the last tension from your shoulders. The silence of the night has been replaced by the pre-dawn stillness, a different quality of quiet that holds anticipation within it, a quiet that knows it will soon be broken by the first sounds of the waking city. But for now, the street remains empty, the gate remains closed, and you remain at your post, as you have on so many nights before, a calm and patient figure in the grey light that gathers slowly over Pompeii. The moon, a waning crescent, hangs low over the mountains to the east, its pale silver light touching the top of the gate arch and drawing a soft, thin line along the edge of the tower. The shadows under the arch are deep and absolute, pooling like black water in the angles of the stone. You stand within the torch's small circle of warmth and watch the moonlight creep slowly downward as the hours slide past. The sharp edge of illumination inching across the rough tufa blocks with a movement too slow to see yet steady enough to notice after many minutes. The sky around the moon is a deep, clear indigo, scattered with the brighter stars that can hold their own against its glow. The air remains cool and still, the kind of stillness that makes the smallest sound, a creak of leather, a soft exhale, feel large and distinct. You adjust the strap of your sandal, bend to tighten the leather thong that has loosened near your ankle, and then straighten again, looking out into the patchwork of black and silver that the moon has made of the street. The shadows themselves have shapes that shift when you move your head. The stepping stone casts a squat rectangle of darkness that stretches toward the gutter. The iron torch bracket casts a long, distorted cross on the wall. Even the spear leaning beside you creates a thin black line that quivers slightly as the flame flickers. You watch these shadows without any particular focus, letting your eyes drift from one to the next, tracing the way the moonlight outlines the high arch of the gate, while leaving the underside in complete obscurity. The contrast between the silvered stone and the black hollow beneath is sharp, like the edge of a blade, and it marks the boundary between two kinds of night, the one touched by the moon's distant reflection and the one that remains untouched. You decide to walk a slow circuit along the wall, a routine that stretches your legs and breaks the long stillness into smaller, manageable pieces. Turning from the gate, you follow the inner face of the city wall for 100 measured paces, your sandals making a soft, rhythmic scuff on the packed earth that lies between the wall and the paved street proper. The earth here is dry and fine, beaten hard by countless patrols, and tiny puffs of dust rise around your heels with each step. The wall rises on your right, massive and silent, its stone blocks fitted so tightly that you cannot slide a fingernail between them. At the 50-pace mark, you pass the narrow drainage channel, where the fountain overflow eventually finds its way, a dry groove now in the summer season, lined with small smooth pebbles that gleam faintly in the moonlight. You continue on, your pace unhurried, counting the steps silently in your head, a simple habit that occupies the surface of your mind while deeper thoughts rest undisturbed. At the 100-pace point, you stop and turn to face the wall, placing your palm flat against the cool stone. The surface is rough and granular, tiny crystals of volcanic tufa catching the faint moonlight like a dusting of silver flour. You stand there for a moment, breathing the night air that smells of dry grass and distant salt, before turning around to face the dark expanse of the city you have left behind. From here, the gate is a small glowing rectangle far down the wall, the torch a single point of orange that seems impossibly distant. The street that runs parallel to the wall is a river of shadow, broken only by the pale tops of stepping stones. Nothing moves between you and the gate, just the long empty corridor of the night, and you feel the solitude of your post settle around you like a familiar cloak. You begin the return walk, your footsteps now retracing the same packed earth, the wall on your left, the city on your right, the moon still hanging low and crescent-sharp of the mountains. As you approach the gate, the torchlight grows from a distant point into a warm pool that welcomes you back, and you see that the flame has pushed the shadows into slightly different configurations during your absence. The bracket shadow now leaning at a new angle as the torch burns lower. You pause beside the main gate and reach out to run your hand along the heavy wooden bar that holds it shut. The bar is a thick beam of oak, dark with age and smooth from the touch of many hands. Your palm travels its full length, feeling the solid weight of it, the way it sits flush and firm in its deep stone sockets on either side. There is no give, no shift, no settling of the wood. It is as immovable as the wall itself, and the iron bands that reinforce it are cold and rough with patches of rust. Satisfied, you withdraw your hand and brush a few splinters of dry wood from your fingers, then turn to the pedestrian door to check its bolt with the same careful attention. The bolt slides smoothly in its channel, the iron cold and slightly oily from its last greasing. Everything is secure as it has been on every watch before this one, and the act of checking is a quiet ritual that marks the completion of your circuit. You now walk over to the observation slit, a narrow vertical gap cut through the wall's thickness to provide a view of the approach from the countryside. The slit is just wide enough for your face, and when you lean into it, the stone presses cool against your cheekbones and forehead. The countryside beyond is a dark, silent world, the land sloping away in gentle folds that you know by daylight to be farm fields, vineyards, and stands of olive trees. Now, under the thin moonlight, those fields are a uniform grey-black, a monochrome quilt stitched by hedgerows and stone boundary walls that appear as slightly darker lines. The road from the gate leads straight out for a mile before curving around a low hill and disappearing, a pale ribbon of compacted earth visible only for the first 100 paces where the moonlight catches it. Beyond that, everything dissolves into indistinct shadow. The mountain called Vesuvius rises against the sky to the southeast, a bulky, dark shape that blocks out the stars along a massive portion of the horizon. Its silhouette is immediately recognizable, a broad base that climbs in a steady slope to a flattish summit with a distinct dip on the northern shoulder. The mountain is so familiar to you that you hardly see it as a separate thing. It is simply the background of your world, the unchanging landmark that has always been there since you were a child, running through the vineyards on its lower slopes. The moonlight picks out the rim of its crater with a faint silver edge, and the rest of the mountain is a deep, absorptive black. There are no lights on its slopes, no sign of any human presence, just the dark mass resting against the star-filled sky. You think nothing of the mountain as you gaze at it. It is a part of the landscape, a silent and unremarkable neighbor whose moods, if a mountain can be said to have moods, have never seemed anything other than benign. You pull back from the slit after a final sweeping glance, your duty to look outward fulfilled for this portion of the watch. Returning to your post beside the torch, you lean the spear against the wall once more and settle into the familiar stance of waiting. Your attention falls on the torch flame itself, a thing you have seen burn for countless hours, yet rarely study with any real focus. Now, however, you notice that the flame bends slightly to the left, a subtle lean that was not there before. The movement is so gentle that the flame does not gutter or smoke. It simply inclines at a small angle, its tip stretched into a longer, sharper point. You hold up your hand near the flame and feel nothing on your skin, no breeze, no movement of air, yet the flame continues its slow, silent bending and the shadows it casts on the stone wall behind the bracket shift accordingly. The shadow of the bracket itself elongates and contracts in a slow, rhythmic motion, like something breathing. You watch this quiet dance of light and dark, with a mild, detached curiosity, understanding that the air must be stirring at a level too high or too faint for your skin to detect. A secret current that moves through the gate arch and touches the flame alone. The flame's subtle movement draws your eyes to the wall behind it, where the long vertical stain of soot has been joined over the years by a complex map of smaller shadows cast by the imperfections of the torch. The stone here is not smooth, it is pocked and chiseled, with small ledges and depressions where the tufa has eroded irregularly. Each small ledge catches the light differently, some throwing sharp black lines, others holding tiny pools of orange glow. The overall effect is a constantly shifting pattern, a living tapestry of light that never repeats exactly. You find yourself following a particular shadow, a thin, dark line that wavers and bends as the flame bends, tracing it from its origin at the bracket all the way up to where it merges with the deeper darkness of the arch. The shadow does nothing remarkable. It simply moves, and you watch it with the same calm attention you might give to clouds drifting across a summer sky. The moon continues its slow traverse, now clearing the mountain ridge and climbing into the open eastern sky, where its crescent shape sharpens against the deepening blackness. The moonlight that reaches the street has changed its angle, no longer striking the top of the arch, but sliding down to illuminate the upper third of the towers. The towers are square, solid structures with flat roofs and narrow windows, and the moonlight now catches the edge of one of those windows, a small rectangle of pale stone that stands out against the dark mass of the wall. The shadows in the street have all shifted slightly, the stepping stone rectangles now pointing in a different direction, the spear's shadow longer and thinner than before. This slow rotation of the shadow world is the only clock you need, a sundial of moonlight that marks the deep hours without sound or number. You shift your weight and feel the stiffness in your hips from standing so long. To ease it, you take a few slow steps away from the bracket and back, a small loop that keeps you within the torch's circle but allows your joints to loosen. The scuff of your sandals on the stone is the loudest sound in the world for a moment, and then it fades, and the fountain's distant murmur reclaims the silence. You roll your neck, letting your head drop forward and then back, feeling the small pops of vertebrae realigning. The motion is slow and deliberate, a stretch that takes a full minute to complete, and when you finish you feel a pleasant warmth spreading down your spine. You pick up the spear and hold it horizontally with both hands, not as a weapon, but as a simple wooden bar that you use to stretch your shoulders, lifting it over your head and then lowering it behind your back. The wood creaks softly, and the iron head catches the torchlight for a brief flash before settling into shadow again. The stretching routine over, you replace the spear against the wall and take up your position once more, your eyes drawn naturally back to the flame. The subtle bending has stopped as mysteriously as it began, the flame now burning straight and tall again, its shadow dance stilled. The air has returned to its previous stillness, and the torch consumes its oil-soaked rags with the steady, unhurried appetite of something that has all night to burn. You pour a little water from your flask and drink, the coolness, a small shock to your throat that wakes you slightly from the drowsy edge you have been skirting. You are not truly sleepy, just settled into a deep, calm rhythm that makes the hours feel like a single, continuous moment. You look up at the moon once more, and notice that a thin veil of high cloud has drifted across its face, softening the crescent into a blur of silver light. The shadows in the street have lost their sharp edges, the stepping stone rectangles now smudged at the borders, the spear's shadow a vague dark smear rather than a clean line. The cloud moves slowly, a transparent scarf dragged across the sky by invisible hands, and after a few minutes it passes, releasing the moon to shine clearly again. The shadows snap back into their sharp, defined shapes, as if a curtain has been drawn open, and the sudden precision of the light is almost startling in its clarity. You watch the transformation with the same quiet interest you give to all the small changes of the night, each one a tiny event that fills the long hours with texture. The observation slit calls to you again, and you make another slow walk along the wall. This time, not a full circuit, but just the short distance to the slit and back. The countryside remains unchanged, the mountain still dark and silent, the farm light still burning its tiny orange point. You note these things without comment, a simple confirmation that the world outside the gate is exactly as it was when you last checked. The reliability of this fact is comforting. You return to the torch and find that the flame has burnt down another finger's width. The oil-soaked cloth, now a dark, charred mass that will need replacing within the hour. You make a mental note of this and lean your shoulder against the cool stone of the arch, letting your gaze wander out into the moonlit street that remains as empty as it has been all through the watch. Your thoughts drift, as they always do during the long middle hours, touching on small, ordinary things. You think about the breakfast you will eat after the watch, a bowl of warm barley porridge with a drizzle of olive oil and maybe a dried fig. You think about the blanket on your cot in the barracks, a wool blanket with a frayed edge that you have been meaning to mend. You think about the sound of the fountain and how it will be drowned out by the noise of the waking city in a few hours, lost beneath the clatter of carts and the shouts of merchants. These thoughts are gentle and undemanding, like leaves floating on a slow current, and you let them come and go without holding on to any of them. The night is long, and there is room for all of them. The shape of shadows continues its slow evolution as the moon climbs higher, and you stand within this quiet transformation, a part of it, a still figure in a world of subtle motion. The torch burns, the fountain murmurs, the mountain waits, and you watch the slow dance of light and dark that fills the hours before dawn at the Stabian Gate. The deepest part of night begins to soften around you in ways that are almost imperceptible, a gradual unwinding of the absolute stillness that has held the city for hours. You have been standing at your post long enough that your body has found its own rhythm, a slow tide of breath and heartbeat that matches the quiet pulse of the sleeping streets. The torch flame, which you replaced a short while ago, burns steady and bright in its iron bracket, and the shadows it casts have settled into familiar patterns against the stone arch. Your ears, tuned now to the deep silence, begin to catch the first faint signals that the night is preparing to release its grip. Small sounds that drift through the cool air like leaves falling onto still water. The first of these is a rooster, somewhere far off in the direction of the amphitheatre. Its crow so thin and distant that it seems almost like a memory of a sound rather than the sound itself. A single ragged note that rises, holds for a breath, and then collapses into silence. The crow does not repeat, and for a long moment afterward, you are not entirely sure you heard it at all. The silence rushes back in to fill the space the sound occupied, and the street remains as empty and dark as before, but something has shifted. Some inner clock of the city has ticked forward one notch, and you know that the long, slow descent toward dawn has truly begun. You stand very still, letting your ears reach out into the darkness like hands feeling for walls in an unfamiliar room. The fountain that you have been hearing all night seems louder now, or perhaps your perception of it has simply sharpened. Its steady murmur rises from the direction of the small public square just inside the gate, where a bronze spout shaped like a lion's head pours a continuous stream of water into a rectangular stone basin. The basin, full to its brim, overflows through a carved notch into a narrow drainage channel that runs along the gutter and eventually empties into the main sewer beneath the street. The sound of this water is layered and complex. The clear splash of the falling stream, the deeper gurgle of the basin receiving it, the faint trickle of the overflow, and beneath all of these, a low, resonant hum that comes from the water moving through the underground channel. You have heard this fountain your entire life, in daylight and in darkness, and its voice is as familiar as your own breathing. Yet now, in the profound quiet of the deep night, it seems to speak with a clarity and presence that it never achieves during the noisy hours. You listen to the fountain without expectation, letting its liquid notes wash over you, and you feel your shoulders drop a fraction, some small tension you were not aware of, holding releasing into the sound of falling water. A new sound drifts over the rooftops, so faint at first that it blends with the fountain's murmur before separating into a distinct note, the creak of an axle. It is a wooden sound, dry and rhythmic, a slow groan that rises and falls with the turning of wheels. Somewhere on the road outside the city, a cart is moving, its driver likely a farmer bringing produce to the early market. The sound carries strangely in the cool, dense air of the pre-dawn, muffled and directionless, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. You turn your head slightly, trying to fix its location, but the city walls and the close-packed buildings scatter and reflect the sound, until it is impossible to tell whether it comes from the Stabian Road or the Vesuvian Road or even some smaller farm track. After a moment, a second sound joins the first, a low murmur of a man's voice calling something to his animal. The words too distant and distorted to understand, but the tone clear enough, calm and unhurried. A farmer speaking to his ox or donkey in the same comfortable way you might speak to a fellow guard on a quiet watch. The voice fades, the axle creak continues for a few more turns, and then both sounds dissolve into the general silence, leaving behind only the fountain and the soft crackle of your torch. You picture the farmer from the previous dawn, the older man with the weathered face and the cart of leafy greens, and you wonder if this is the same man arriving earlier than usual, or a different farmer entirely, one of the dozens who make this journey every morning from the small farms scattered across the plain. You pour a little water from the small clay flask tied to your belt, tilting it carefully so the liquid runs slowly into your mouth. The water is cool but not cold, having absorbed the night's temperature, and it tastes faintly of the earthen jar where it was stored, a clean mineral flavor that refreshes your dry throat. You hold the water in your mouth for a moment, letting it wash over your tongue and the back of your palate, before swallowing with a quiet, slow gulp. The sensation of the water moving down your throat is pleasant and grounding, a small physical reminder that you are alive and awake while the rest of the city sleeps. You replace the stopper with a gentle push and hang the flask back on your belt, wiping your mouth with the back of your hand, and then you fold your arms and return your gaze to the dark street, settling back into the patient watchfulness that has carried you through so many nights. From a high window in a building across the street, a faint lamp flickers into life. The window is a small rectangle set into the upper story of what you know to be an apartment block, and the lamp appears as a tiny yellow dot that moves slowly behind a thin curtain. The curtain, a pale linen fabric, glows with the warm light, and you can see the indistinct shadow of a person moving behind it, a shape that pauses, shifts, and then moves again. Perhaps it is a mother tending to a restless child, or a baker rising early to light his oven, or simply someone who has woken from a dream and cannot return to sleep. You watch the lamp with a detached, gentle curiosity, tracking its slow movements as it travels from one side of the window to the other and then stops, hovering in place for a long minute. The light is so small and so distant that it illuminates nothing beyond the window itself. The street below remains dark, the building's facade unlit. Yet that single point of yellow is a reminder that you are not the only waking soul in the city, that other lives are stirring behind the silent walls, each one a small universe of private thoughts and quiet actions. The lamp eventually moves away from the window and disappears, the curtain going dark, and the building becomes once again just a dark shape among dark shapes. The silence that follows seems somehow deeper than before, enriched by the brief interruption, as if the small light and the small movement have made the stillness more noticeable by contrast. You uncross your arms and let them hang at your sides, feeling the cool air on your hands. The air has grown colder in the last hour, the temperature dropping to that low point that always comes just before the first hint of dawn. Your breath forms the faintest ghost of vapor when you exhale, a tiny cloud that vanishes almost before it exists. The wool of your tunic, which earlier felt adequate, now seems thin, and you pull your cloak a little tighter around your shoulders, tucking the fabric under your chin to seal in the warmth of your body. The cloak smells of cedar and old wool, a comforting scent that you associate with the quiet hours of your duty. You stamp your feet softly on the stone, one then the other, the leather of your sandals making a muted thud that does not echo, absorbed by the porous tufa of the walls and the open air of the gate arch. The movement stirs your blood slightly, and you feel a brief flush of warmth in your toes before the cold reasserts itself. A second rooster crows, this one closer than the first, perhaps from a yard behind the bakery on the corner. Its call is more insistent, a full-throated challenge that rises and repeats, two notes in quick succession before breaking off into a flutter of wings. You can actually hear the wing beats, a soft whirring sound, followed by the cluck of a hen disturbed from her roost. The small commotion lasts only a few seconds, and then the yard falls silent again, the birds settling back into their pre-dawn stupor. But the rooster has done its work. It has announced the approaching day to anyone who is listening, and somewhere in the city, other roosters will now be stirring, preparing their own responses, a chain reaction of crowing that will spread from yard to yard as the sky lightens. You have heard this progression many times, the relay of roosters that marks the final hour of darkness, and you know that more crows will follow in the minutes ahead. The ox cart you heard earlier has apparently reached the city, because you now hear the slow clop of hooves and the rumble of wheels on the paving stones somewhere deeper in the streets, perhaps approaching the forum from a different gate. The sound is muffled by distance and by the intervening buildings, but it has the unmistakable rhythm of a loaded cart, the wheels hitting the joins between paving stones with a regular thump and pause, thump and pause. The driver's voice calls out again, a low word of encouragement to his animal, and you can now catch the general tone even if the words remain unclear. A calm, patient command, the voice of a man who has made this journey hundreds of times and will make it hundreds more. The sound fades as the cart turns a corner and moves deeper into the city, toward the forum where the early market is already beginning to stir. You picture the forum in your mind, the long open rectangle of paved stone, the colonnades on either side, the temple at the far end with its tall columns and triangular pediment. At this hour, the forum would be almost empty, just a few early arrivals setting up their stalls, unrolling awnings, arranging produce on wooden tables. The cart you hear will join them soon, and the driver will unload his baskets and settle in for a long day of selling. But all of that lies ahead, in the daylight world that has not yet arrived. You take a slow walk to the observation slit, your footsteps steady and unhurried on the packed earth. The slit is a narrow vertical gap in the wall, and when you lean into it, the cold stone presses against your cheeks and the bridge of your nose. The countryside outside is still dark, but the darkness has changed its character. It is no longer the absolute, featureless black of midnight, but a graduated darkness, a spectrum of greys and deep blues that differentiates the land from the sky. The mountain Vesuvius is a solid silhouette against the eastern horizon, its bulk darker than the sky around it, and the farmland at its base is a patchwork of slightly lighter grey rectangles, the fields and vineyards visible now as distinct shapes. The single farm light you noticed earlier still burns, a tiny orange point, but it seems fainter now, diluted by the general lightening of the atmosphere. The road, a pale ribbon, is visible for a longer stretch than before, and you can just make out the dark shape of a tree beside it, a solitary umbrella pine that marks the half-mile point from the gate. Nothing moves on the road. No cart, no figure, no animal. The farmer you heard must have entered by a different gate, perhaps the Vesuvian or the Nucerian, heading for a different market stall. You pull back from the slit and return to your post, the spear waiting where you left it, the torch still burning with its quiet flame. The fountain's murmur draws your attention again as you settle back into position, and you realize that you have been hearing it continuously all night without truly noticing it. It has been the background to every other sound, the canvas on which all the small noises of the night have been painted. Now, in this lull between distant sounds, the fountain reasserts itself, its liquid voice clear and steady. You decide to walk over to it, a small deviation from your post that is well within your duties. The fountain is just inside the gate, in a small public square where travelers can water their animals before entering the city proper. You approach it slowly, your sandals loud on the paving stones after the long silence, and stop beside the stone basin. The water spills from the bronze lion's head in a smooth, unbroken stream, catching the torchlight in a way that makes it look like molten silver. The basin is full to its brim, the surface of the water perfectly flat and dark except where the falling stream creates a circular ripple that spreads outward to the stone edges. You dip your fingers into the basin, feeling the cool water flow around them, and then lift your wet hand to your face, pressing the moisture to your forehead and cheeks. The water is refreshing, a small shock of coolness that clears the last cobwebs from your mind. You dry a hand on your tunic and turn back toward the gate, the fountain continuing its endless song behind you. By the time you reach your post, the sky has changed again, the deep indigo of full night giving way to a slightly paler blue in the east. The stars near the horizon have begun to fade, their light blunted by the growing brightness, though directly overhead they still shine with undiminished clarity. The moon, which has been your companion through the watch, has climbed higher and now hangs above the towers, a thin crescent of silver that seems almost translucent against the lightening sky. The city is still asleep, but the quality of its sleep has shifted from the deep, motionless rest of midnight to the lighter, more restless sleep that precedes waking. You feel this shift in the air, in the increasing frequency of small sounds from the houses, in the subtle change of the light, in the way your own body begins to anticipate the end of the watch, even though dawn is still some time away. You fold your arms and lean your shoulder against the cool stone of the arch, a calm and patient figure in the grey pre-dawn, listening to the faint sounds of a city slowly stirring from its dreams. The sky begins to change so subtly that you do not notice it at first as a distinct event, only as a gradual accumulation of small differences that eventually press upon your awareness. The deep blackness overhead has thinned into something softer, a dark indigo that holds less weight. Where the stars near the eastern horizon once burned sharp and cold, they now seem to quiver and lose their edges, their light dissolving into the first faint wash of atmosphere that is gathering the sun's still hidden approach. You have been watching the same patch of sky for an hour without truly seeing it change, the transformation happening in increments too fine for the eye to catch. Yet the overall effect is unmistakable now, as you lift your gaze and let it rest on the horizon. The silhouette of the temple roof on the forum, which before was merely an absence of stars, a black shape indistinguishable from the black sky, has become a distinct outline, a dark mass with a peaked roof and the suggestion of columns separating from the deep blue behind it. The temple is there, solid and familiar, emerging from the night like a thought slowly forming. You shift your posture against the cool stone of the gate arch and let your eyes travel across the waking shapes of the city, noting how the rooftops are now drawn in charcoal lines against a sky that is no longer black, but a deep, watery blue-grey. The transformation is silent and slow, a gentle unrolling of light that asks nothing of the world but patience. You have seen this change countless times from this same spot, and its familiarity does not diminish its quiet power. The moon, now far to the west and sinking low, is a pale, thin crescent, its light no longer silver, but a dim white that barely reaches the street. The torch beside you sputters once, a soft pop of oil and cloth that draws your eyes downward. The flame has begun to burn irregularly, flaring and shrinking as the last of the oil-soaked rags are consumed. You know it is time to replace it before the flame dies entirely and leaves you in the grey half-light without your small companion of warmth. You walk the 3 steps to the niche in the wall and take a fresh torch from the stone holder, its handle smooth and dry, its head a tight wrap of rags soaked in olive oil. Returning to the bracket, you hold the fresh torch to the dying flame until it catches with a low whoosh, the new flame springing up bright and yellow, taller than the old one, and eager. You set the fresh torch into the iron bracket, where it settles into a steady burn, and then turn to the old torch, pressing its flickering head against the stone wall until the last tongue of flame extinguishes with a thin spiral of white smoke. The smoke rises straight up for a moment, then bends and disperses as a faint draft moves through the gate arch. You place the spent torch back in the niche to cool, and your small ritual is complete, a marker of time past, a handhold on the long climb toward daylight. The air has changed while you were focused on the torch. It feels cooler now, crisper, with a clean edge that was absent during the deeper hours. This is the hour just before dawn, the time when the earth seems to pause and gather itself, when the coldest air settles into the low places and everything holds its breath. You pull your cloak a little closer, feeling the coarse wool against your neck, and you notice that your breath now forms the faintest wisp of vapor, a tiny ghost that appears for a heartbeat and then vanishes. The cold is not unpleasant, it is simply a new sensation, a reminder that the world is shifting from one state to another. The street before you, which was a corridor of shadows and grey shapes, is now revealing its details one by one, as if a veil is being lifted thread by thread. You can see the cracks between the paving stones, dark irregular lines that trace the edges of each polygon of basalt, some of them filled with packed dust, others with tiny weeds that have found a foothold in the stone. The stepping stones, those raised blocks placed for pedestrians to cross without stepping in the muck of rainy days, are no longer black silhouettes, but pale, rough-surfaced blocks, whose chips and wear marks are becoming visible. You notice the chipped corner of the 3rd stepping stone from the gate, a fresh break that must have happened recently, perhaps from a heavily laden cart striking it the day before. The broken edge is lighter than the rest of the stone, a raw grey against the weathered dark, and your eye returns to it several times as the light grows. On the wall of the fuller's shop, the faded painting of a man treading cloth in a vat is emerging from the darkness, its colours still grey and muted, but its shapes now distinguishable. The red ochre of the man's tunic is just a suggestion of warmth, the blue of the vat a pale shadow. The wine shop's painted amphora sign, which hung as a colourless shape all night, now shows a faint terracotta hue, a hint of its daytime cheerfulness returning. Across the street, a shop that sells oil lamps has a row of small round clay lamps displayed on a wooden shelf behind an iron grate, and you can now see each lamp as a distinct object, their handles and spouts outlined against the dark interior. The world is filling in, detail by detail, like a mosaic being assembled one tiny stone at a time. You turn your attention upwards to the gate arch itself, that high curve of tufa blocks that has sheltered your watch all through the night. The stone is changing colour as the sky lightens, shifting from the deep, cold grey of night to a warm, pale ochre that seems to glow from within. The texture of the stone is becoming visible, the tiny pits and gouges left by the mason's chisel, the faint horizontal lines that mark the layers of volcanic ash from which the stone was formed. The arch has stood here for generations, and its surface carries the memory of every rainstorm and every hot afternoon, a patina of age that the soft morning light makes gentle and beautiful. The two square towers that flank the gate are also warming, their upper edges catching the very first diffusion of direct light. A pale golden wash that is not yet strong enough to cast shadows, but is bright enough to separate the towers from the retreating sky. You walk your slow circuit along the wall, stepping away from the gate and moving along the packed earth path, your sandals making the same soft scuff they have made all night. The wall is a constant companion on your right, its stones now clearly visible, each block a small rectangle of pale tufa with darker mortar lines. You pause at the observation slit and look out at the countryside, which has transformed dramatically during the last hour. The landscape that was a uniform blackness now stretches before you in soft shades of grey and green-grey, a patchwork of fields and vineyards and orchards that are slowly separating from one another as the light grows. The road from the gate is a pale ribbon of packed earth that you can follow with your eyes for half a mile before it dips behind a low hill. The trees that line the road are no longer dark blurs but distinct forms, their branches bare and delicate against the brightening sky. The mountain Vesuvius still dominates the southeastern view, but it is no longer a menacing black shape. It is a soft blue-grey mass with a flat top, its slopes covered in the dark green of vineyards and the lighter grey of bare rock, its presence calm and familiar. A thin wisp of white cloud, the first cloud of the morning, sits just above the summit, motionless and small. You lower your gaze to the farmhouse whose lamp you have watched all night, that single orange point of light on the dark plain. The lamp is still burning, but is now so faint against the growing daylight that you have to search for it, a tiny yellow speck that barely registers. The farmhouse itself is emerging, a low stone building with a tiled roof and a small courtyard, a wisp of smoke rising from a chimney as someone inside stirs the morning fire. The smoke is grey and thin, climbing straight up in the still air before dispersing. The sight of it is a quiet reassurance that the world outside the walls is waking too, that the same slow rhythm of morning is touching the farms and the city alike. You turn away from the slit and walk back toward the gate, your circuit complete. By the time you reach the torch bracket, the sky has brightened another perceptible degree, and the flame of the fresh torch now looks pale and unnecessary, a yellow ghost of itself. The temple roof on the forum, which you can see above the rooftops, has caught the first true golden light of the approaching sun, its terracotta tiles glowing a warm ruddy orange that stands out against the pale blue sky. The columns beneath the roof are still in shadow, but their tops are gilded, each capital touched with a soft brush of light. You stop and watch the temple for a long moment, the slow spread of gold across the roof, the way the light seems to pour down the tiles like honey, and you feel the familiar sense of completion that comes with the end of a watch, the knowledge that the night has been kept and the day is arriving as promised. The paving stones at your feet are now fully visible, their surfaces marked by the passage of countless carts, the iron rims of wheels having cut long, parallel grooves into the hard basalt over the decades. The grooves are filled with small stones and dust, and a few stray olive pits from the previous day's market are lodged in the cracks. The red lettering on the fuller's shop is now legible, a painted advertisement for the services offered: wall cleaning, stain removal, pressing. The letters are written in a neat Roman script, their red paint flaking at the edges, but still bright enough to read. The stepping stones now show their own small advertisements, the names of politicians who paid for their installation scratched lightly into the surface, their letters worn smooth by feet. You notice these details without any urgency, simply cataloguing them as a way of filling the last hour of the watch with quiet observation. The cool air continues to hold its crispness, but there is a promise of warmth within it, a subtle undertone of the heat that will come later in the day when the sun is high and the paving stones bake under its glare. For now the air is perfect, clean and fresh, carrying the faint scent of the sea mixed with the nearer smells of stone and dust, and the first hint of bread from the bakery that is just beginning to fire its ovens. A thin wisp of smoke now rises from the bakery's chimney, darker and thicker than the farmhouse smoke, and the smell of it touches your nose with a pleasant, yeasty warmth. The baker and his workers are up, moving in the dark interior, preparing the dough that was mixed the night before, shaping it into round loaves, sliding it into the hot oven on long wooden paddles. You will stop there after your watch, you think, and buy a small loaf with the coin you have in your pouch, a warm breakfast to carry back to the barracks. You return the spear to its place against the wall and take a final sip of water from your flask, the liquid cool and clean, the flask now nearly empty. The fountain's murmur is still audible, a constant background thread, but it is slowly being joined by other sounds. A second rooster crows, this one very close, perhaps from the yard of the inn just around the corner. Its call a loud, ragged burst that echoes off the stone walls. A dog barks twice, then settles. From somewhere deeper in the city, you hear the creak of a wooden cart axle, the first vehicle of the morning being pulled out of a stable, and the low voice of a man speaking soothingly to his ox. These sounds of the city's first waking words, a quiet conversation between the night and the day, and you listen to them with the deep contentment of one whose duty is nearly done. The gate arch above you continues to warm in colour, the ochre deepening to a soft gold, and the shadows it casts are now crisp and clean, the angle of the stone clearly defined against the brightening sky. You can see the joints between each block, the fine line of mortar that has darkened with age, the small chisel marks that some long-forgotten mason left as his signature. The arch is beautiful in the morning light, a simple, functional structure that has become, through the alchemy of dawn, something worth looking at with quiet appreciation. You trace the curve of it with your eyes, from the left pillar up to the keystone and down to the right pillar, and you feel the solidity of it, the weight of the stone held in perfect balance, a testament to the builders who laid these blocks so precisely that not a single one has shifted in all the years you have stood beneath it. The change of light continues its steady progress, and as you watch, the first direct ray of sunlight slips over the eastern mountains and touches the very top of the right-hand tower, a sudden spot of bright, warm gold that seems to set the stone on fire. The spot is small at first, just a finger of light, but it quickly widens and slides downward, spilling over the edge of the tower and illuminating the upper window with a blaze of yellow. More rays follow one after another, until the whole upper half of the tower is glowing, and the shadow it casts on the street is a long, sharp rectangle of darkness that points directly toward the Forum. You watch this arrival of true daylight with something close to reverence, though you would not call it that. It is simply the moment you have been waiting for all night, the moment when the watch officially transitions from the dark hours to the light, a clean demarcation that you feel in your bones. Now the street is striped with light and shadow, the low sun cutting across the rooftops and painting bright gold bands on the paving stones, while leaving the areas behind the stepping stones in deep, cool shade. The contrast is sharp and clean, and the whole street looks like a geometric pattern laid out for some quiet purpose. The shadows of the buildings slide slowly across the ground, and you know that in a few hours they will shorten and disappear, the sun climbing high enough to erase all darkness from the street. But for now, The play of light and shadow is a final gift of the dawn, a quiet show that you watch with unhurried attention, your body still and your mind calm. You roll your shoulders one last time, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles that have held the same position for hours, and you turn to face the street that leads toward the barracks. The watch is almost over. The change of light is complete, the sky now a pale, clear blue with only a few high clouds catching the last pinks and golds of sunrise. The torch, still burning in its bracket, is a faint, irrelevant flame that you will soon leave for the day guard to extinguish. You pick up your spear, feeling the familiar weight of it in your hand, and you wait for the sound of footsteps approaching from the barracks, the sound that will mark the end of your long night and the beginning of your rest. The change of light has come and gone, and the world is awake, and you are still here, at your post, watching the quiet street with the same steady patience you have held all through the dark hours. A sound brings your attention to the road outside the gate, a slow and rhythmic clopping that comes from the packed earth beyond the wall, muffled at first by the thickness of the gate and the pedestrian door, but growing steadily clearer as it draws nearer. The sound resolves into distinct elements as you turn your head and listen: the measured plod of hooves, the wooden creak of cartwheels turning on their axle, and beneath both of these, the faint jingle of a harness bell or perhaps a metal fitting tapping against wood. Someone is approaching the gate from the countryside road, the first traveller of the morning, arriving at the hour when the sky has brightened enough to make the road visible, but the sun has not yet cleared the rooftops. You straighten your posture and step toward the small pedestrian door, your sandals quiet on the worn stone, and you reach down to grasp the iron bolt that holds the door shut through the night. The bolt is cold and slightly damp with the morning's dew, its surface rough under your fingers as you slide it back with a single smooth motion that produces a low, metallic scrape. The door swings inward on its heavy iron hinges, and you step through the narrow opening into the grey morning light that now fills the approach to the gate. Outside, the sky is a pale wash of blue and pink above the eastern mountains, and the air carries the crisp chill that will linger until the sun climbs high enough to warm the land. The road stretches away before you, a pale ribbon of packed earth bordered by low stone walls and the dark shapes of umbrella pines. And there, just a few paces from the gate, stands a donkey cart halted in the middle of the road. The donkey is a sturdy grey animal with long ears that swivel toward you as you appear in the doorway, its breath steaming in the cool air in slow, patient plumes. Behind the donkey, the cart is a simple wooden vehicle with two high wheels and a flat bed, loaded with large woven baskets that overflow with leafy greens and pale round turnips, their surfaces damp and fresh, clearly harvested before dawn from a farm somewhere on the plain. The farmer stands beside the cart with one hand resting on the donkey's neck, an older man with a weathered face and deep lines around his eyes. His tunic, a simple undyed wool, much like your own, his hands rough and dark from years of working the soil. He waits without impatience, having done this many times before, and when he sees you emerge he gives a small, slow nod of acknowledgement that you return with equal calm. You ask his business in a voice quiet from the long night, the words coming out softer than you intended, shaped by the stillness you have inhabited for hours. He gives his name, a simple Roman name common among the farmers of the region, and tells you his destination, a stall in the Forum Market where he sells his vegetables every morning. His voice is low and unhurried, carrying the same rural calm as the donkey's steady breathing, and he gestures with a tilt of his head toward the loaded baskets behind him. You step closer to the cart and begin your inspection without hurry, lifting a damp cloth that covers one of the baskets to see the produce beneath. The greens are fresh and crisp. Their leaves a deep, vibrant color even in the grey morning light, droplets of water still clinging to their stems where the farmer washed them before loading. The turnips are pale and smooth, their roots clean and trimmed, arranged in neat layers separated by straw. You shift the cloth back into place and move to the next basket, where you find more of the same fresh herbs tied in small bundles with twine, their fragrance rising as you disturb the air around them. Everything is as it should be. Honest farm produce bound for the city market, and you check that nothing is hidden beneath the vegetables, no contraband or undeclared goods, your hands moving through the familiar motions of a duty you have performed countless times. The donkey stands patient through all of this, its large dark eyes watching you with a calm liquid gaze that seems to hold no curiosity whatsoever. Its coat is rough and warm when you briefly touch its shoulder in passing, and the animal does not flinch or startle, merely exhales a long, slow breath through its nostrils that sends another cloud of steam into the morning air. The cart's wooden frame is sturdy and well maintained. The wheels recently greased, judging by the clean film of oil on the axle ends, the bedboards fitted tight and solid. A small clay lantern hangs from a hook on the cart's front post, its flame long extinguished, a faint wisp of smoke still curling from its spout. The farmer has travelled in darkness, guided by that small light along the familiar road that he could probably walk in his sleep after so many years of the same journey. You step back from the cart and nod to the farmer, telling him in a few quiet words that all is in order and he may enter. He returns the nod with the same slow economy of motion and makes a soft clicking sound with his tongue, a signal the donkey understands immediately. The animal leans into its harness, the leather straps creaking as they take the weight, and the cart begins to roll forward with a low rumble of wooden wheels on packed earth. You stand aside, holding the pedestrian door open wide, and the cart passes slowly through the narrow opening with only inches to spare on either side, the farmer guiding his donkey with light touches and quiet murmurs. The wheels bump over the threshold stone where the packed earth outside transitions to the basalt paving blocks inside, a single jolt that makes the greens in the top baskets shiver and settle. Then the cart is through, and the farmer is inside the city, the whole transaction having taken no more than a few minutes of quiet, unhurried cooperation. You close the door behind him and slide the iron bolt back into place with the same low metallic scrape, sealing the gate once more. The sound of the cartwheels continues for a while, the rumble of wood on stone growing fainter as the farmer guides his donkey down the main street toward the forum, and you can hear the soft clop of the hooves echoing off the building fronts, a rhythmic sound that gradually fades into the general murmur of the waking city. The street before you is empty again, the paving stones grey and still, the stepping stones pale in the early light, and the fountain's steady murmur reasserts itself as the dominant sound now that the cart has passed. You lean your shoulder against the cool stone of the arch and fold your arms, settling back into the patient watchfulness that has carried you through the night, your body returning to its accustomed posture beside the torch bracket. The brief interruption has left a small wake of warmth, a reminder of the human world that exists beyond the solitary duty of the night watch. You find yourself thinking about the farmer, picturing his journey in reverse, the miles of dark road he travelled with only his lantern and his donkey, the familiar turns and landmarks that guided him, the way the sky slowly lightened as he approached the city. He makes this trip every morning, you realize, just as you stand this watch every few nights, two parallel routines that briefly intersect at the gate, before diverging again into the separate rhythms of city and farm. The thought is a quiet one, undemanding, and it drifts through your mind like a leaf on still water before settling into the depths, where such small reflections go. The torch beside you has burned down another finger's width while you were occupied, the flame now slightly lower in its bracket, the oil-soaked rags darkening as they char. You will not need to replace it again. The sky is bright enough now that the torch's light is mostly symbolic, a tradition of the watch rather than a true necessity. You can see the full length of the street clearly, the details of the shop fronts and the cracks in the paving stones, and the daylight is growing stronger with each passing minute. The sun now fully above the mountains and climbing into a sky that has shifted from pale blue to a clearer, warmer tone. The temple roof on the forum is bathed in golden light, its terracotta tiles glowing warmly, and the columns beneath are emerging from shadow, their fluted surfaces catching the light in long vertical stripes. You walk the short distance to the observation slit and look out at the road again, the same road the farmer travelled, now empty and peaceful in the morning light. The countryside is fully visible now, a patchwork of green fields and darker vineyards, and the pale grey of olive groves, all of it stretched out under a sky that holds only a few high, thin clouds. The mountain Vesuvius stands in its familiar place, its slopes soft and green, its summit clear and unthreatening, a gentle giant that has presided over countless mornings just like this one. The farm light you watched all night has finally been extinguished, its small orange point now just a dark speck against a stone wall. The road curves away from the gate and disappears behind a low hill, and somewhere beyond that hill, other farmers are likely on their way, their carts loaded with produce, their donkeys plodding steadily toward the city gates. But for now, the road is yours alone to watch, a quiet ribbon of earth that connects the waking city to the waking countryside. You pull back from the slit and return to your post, your circuit complete, the spear waiting where you left it, leaning against the stone. The street inside the gate is still largely empty, but the signs of the coming day are multiplying now. A second cart has appeared at the far end of the street, this one drawn by an ox and loaded with clay amphorae, probably wine or oil from one of the larger estates. The cart is still distant, a small, slow-moving shape, and its driver is a dark figure walking beside the ox with a long switch in his hand. You watch the cart's slow progress without urgency, knowing that it will take several minutes to reach the gate, that the ox moves at its own deliberate pace, and that the inspection will be just as calm and unhurried as the first one. Beyond the cart, more of the shops are opening, their shutters being rolled up by sleepy workers, their interiors still dark but slowly stirring. The bakery on the corner has its doors open now, and the warm smell of baking bread is stronger, a rich, yeasty scent that fills the street and makes your stomach stir with anticipation. You roll your shoulders and adjust your belt, feeling the pleasant tiredness that has settled into your muscles after the long night. Your body knows that the watch is nearing its end, and it has begun to anticipate the rest that will follow. The cot in the barracks, the warm blanket, the deep, dreamless sleep. But you do not hurry. There is no point in hurrying, for the watch will end when the watch ends, and the relief will come when the relief comes, and the minutes in between are simply minutes, to be filled with the same steady presence you have maintained all night. You pour the last sip of water from your flask, tilting it to catch every drop, and you swallow slowly, feeling the cool liquid trace its way down your throat, the last refreshment of the watch. The second cart draws nearer, its details becoming clearer as it approaches through the morning light. The ox is a huge, pale beast with a humped shoulder and wide, curving horns, its head low and its pace slow and ponderous. The driver is a younger man than the farmer, perhaps the son of the estate owner, his tunic cinched at the waist with a leather belt, his sandals dusty from the road. The amphorae in his cart are tall and slender, their pointed bottoms wedged into straw-filled racks to keep them upright, their clay surfaces of pale terracotta marked with painted labels that identify the contents and the estate. You step forward to meet the cart as it rumbles to a halt just outside the pedestrian door, and you go through the same familiar motions: the quiet greeting, the inspection of the cargo, the brief check that all is in order. The exchange is simple and without complication, the driver giving the name of his estate and the destination of his goods, a wine shop in the Forum, while you lift a corner of the tarp that covers the amphorae and confirm that the labels match the declaration. When you are satisfied, you step back and wave the cart through, and the ox leans into its yoke with a low grunt. The wheels begin their slow turn, and the cart passes through the gate with the same quiet rumble as the one before. You close the door and slide the bolt once more, the motion now a familiar rhythm that your hands perform without conscious thought. The street has grown busier in the last few minutes. A woman in a long stola carries a water jar on her shoulder toward the fountain, her sandals slapping softly on the paving stones, and a group of 3 men in workers' tunics walk past in the direction of the Forum, their voices a low murmur of conversation that you cannot quite catch. A dog trots across the street with its nose to the ground, pausing to investigate a crack between the stones, and then continues on its way, disappearing into an alley beside the fuller's shop. The city is waking in earnest now, shedding the last remnants of the night stillness, and your own role in its nighttime architecture is drawing to a close. You lean the spear against the wall one final time and stand with your arms folded, watching the street fill with the slow, steady traffic of early morning. The sun has climbed above the rooftops now, and its warm light spills directly into the street, casting long, sharp shadows from the stepping stones and the shopfront columns. The paving stones, which were cool and grey all night, are beginning to absorb the sun's heat, and you can feel the faint warmth radiating upward against your ankles. The temple roof gleams golden in the distance, and the sky above is a clear, bright blue, the kind of blue that promises a hot afternoon. The torch in its bracket is a pale, insignificant flame now, almost invisible in the full daylight, and it will soon be extinguished by the day guard who will take your place. You wait with the same calm patience you have held all night. Your body still, your mind quiet, your duty almost complete. The first trader has arrived and passed through, the second has followed, and more will come in the hours ahead, an unending stream of carts and donkeys and farmers that will keep the gate busy until nightfall. But that will be someone else's watch, someone else's duty, someone else's quiet hours of standing and waiting. Your own watch is ending, and the approaching sound of familiar footsteps from the direction of the barracks tells you that your relief is on his way, walking through the bright morning streets to take the spear from your hand and the gate from your care. The sky is now a pale, watery blue, and the first direct light has not yet touched the rooftops, but is spreading behind the mountain in a slow, golden tide that pushes the darkness further and further west. You stand at your post beside the Stabian Gate, your body heavy with the pleasant tiredness that comes from a full night of quiet duty, and watch the transformation of the city with the calm, unhurried attention of someone who has seen it all before. The torch in its iron bracket still burns, a pale and insignificant flame now, its orange glow washed out by the growing daylight, its crackle barely audible above the increasing sounds of the waking city. You have not replaced it again, knowing that the day guard will extinguish it when he arrives and put in a fresh torch for his own watch, a small ritual that marks the transition from night duty to day duty with the same quiet precision as the changing of the guard itself. More sounds fill the street now, a gradual accumulation of small noises that blend together into the low murmur of a city stirring from sleep. You hear the rattle of a shop shutter being rolled up on its wooden tracks, a series of short, percussive clacks that echo off the stone walls of the narrow street. The sound comes from the direction of the oil lamp shop, where the proprietor, a squat man with a bald head and ink-stained fingers, is opening for the day's business. His wares laid out on a wooden shelf behind an iron grate, small clay lamps in neat rows, their spouts pointing outward, their bodies pale and round. Across the street, a bronze pot clanks against a stone counter inside a cookshop. A single clear note that rings out and then fades, followed by the hiss of water striking a hot surface, the cook beginning to prepare the morning meal for the workers who will soon gather. A woman's voice calls out from a high window, summoning a child from the courtyard below, her words in the local dialect, a string of syllables that rise and fall in a familiar pattern before the slam of a wooden door cuts them off. Somewhere a dog barks twice, then settles into silence, its brief complaint answered by no one. The street sweepers appear at the far end of the main road that leads to the forum, two men moving slowly in your direction with the measured pace of a daily routine that never varies. They carry twig brooms bound with leather strips, their bristles worn short and uneven from countless miles of sweeping, and they work in a steady rhythm that you've seen so many times it has become part of the architecture of the morning. One man walks on the left side of the street, the other on the right, and they bend at the waist with each stroke, pushing dust and small debris toward the central gutter where the drainage channel will eventually carry the refuse away when the next rain comes. Their brooms make a soft, scratchy sound on the basalt paving stones, a whisper that grows louder as they approach and then fades as they pass, their eyes fixed on the ground, their bodies moving with the automatic grace of long practice. They do not speak to each other, nor do they look up at you, and you do not call out to them. You are each a part of the morning's quiet machinery, and there is no need for acknowledgement beyond the simple fact of your parallel presence. They sweep past the fountain, around the stepping stones under the shadow of the gate arch, and then continue on toward the next street, their figures growing smaller until they turn a corner and disappear, leaving behind a clean pavement and the faint, dry smell of disturbed dust. The weight of the night has settled into your shoulders and behind your eyes, a pleasant tiredness that makes the world feel slightly soft at the edges. You are not sleepy in the way that threatens to pull you under. Rather, you are relaxed in a deep, physical way, your muscles loose and warm despite the morning chill, your thoughts slow and untroubled. You have been standing for hours, and your body has adapted to the stillness, finding its own small adjustments and postures that minimize discomfort. Now that the end of the watch is approaching, you allow yourself to acknowledge the tiredness, to feel it as a sensation rather than push it aside, and you find that it is not unpleasant at all, simply a signal that your duty is nearly done and rest is near. You roll your head slowly from side to side, feeling the gentle stretch in your neck, and you let out a long, quiet exhale that carries no tension, just the simple release of breath. You begin to mentally count the moments until your replacement arrives, a habit you have developed over many watches, a way of marking the final stretch without impatience. You know that the changing of the guard follows the same schedule every day, that your relief will be walking from the barracks at roughly the same time he always does, and that there is no use in watching the street for him until the appointed hour. Instead, you check the position of the sun by the color of the clouds high above, wispy streaks of pink and gold that are the last remnants of the dawn, now fading into white against the pale blue sky. The clouds are thin and delicate, stretched long by high-altitude winds, and they move slowly eastward, pulled toward the mountains by currents you cannot feel at ground level. Their color shifts even as you watch, the pink deepening for a moment before dissolving into a soft peach, then a pale yellow, and finally the pure white of full daylight. The show is a quiet one, easily missed, and you feel a small satisfaction at having been present to witness it. The temple columns at the far end of the forum catch the first true light of the sun, which has now risen above the eastern mountains and is shining directly into the city. The columns blow a warm apricot color, their fluted surfaces picking up the light in vertical stripes of golden shadow, and the triangular pediment above them is bathed in a soft, even radiance that makes the terracotta sculptures stand out in sharp relief. You can see the figures clearly from your post, the central god or hero, the flanking figures in their flowing robes, the small decorative details along the roofline, all of them emerging from the night's obscurity into the brilliant clarity of morning. The temple is the visual anchor of the city, the point toward which all the main streets converge, and seeing it lit by the morning sun is like watching the city's heart begin to beat. You let your gaze rest on the golden columns for a long moment, drawing a quiet comfort from their solidity, their permanence, their reminder that the world continues in its orderly way. Your attention returns to the immediate surroundings, the street just outside the gate, where the small businesses are completing their opening rituals. The fuller's workshop has its doors open now, and you can see the workers moving inside, their figures dark against the dim interior, their arms carrying bundles of cloth to the large stone vats where the fabric will be soaked and trodden. The smell of the fuller's chemicals drifts out into the street, a sharp alkaline scent that cuts through the softer smells of bread and morning air. The wine shop next to it is still closed, its painted amphora sign hanging motionless above the locked door, but you know that it will open later in the morning, once the market is in full swing and the customers begin to wander. The bakery on the corner, however, is in full operation, its doors wide open, its interior lit by the orange glow of the oven fire, its workers moving quickly between the kneading table and the oven mouth with long wooden paddles. The smell of fresh bread is intense now, rich and yeasty and warm, and it fills the street with a promise of simple, good things. You know you will stop there on your walk back to the barracks, trading a small coin for a still warm roll that will be your breakfast, and the anticipation of that warm bread is one of the quiet pleasures that carries you through the final minutes of the watch. You shift your spear to your other hand, the wood smooth and warm where your palm has held it, the iron head catching a glint of sunlight as it moves. The spear has been your companion all night, a silent partner in the duty of watching, and you handle it with the same absent familiarity you would give to any tool used daily for years. Your hand finds the worn spot on the shaft automatically, the place where the wood has been polished by countless hours of holding, and your grip settles into its accustomed position without thought. You will soon hand this spear to your relief, transferring not just a weapon, but a responsibility, a piece of the city's nighttime order from one pair of hands to another. The thought is not dramatic or weighty, it is simply the way things work, the smooth functioning of a system that has kept the city safe for longer than anyone can remember. From your post you can now see much further down the road outside the gate, the morning light having chased away the last shadows of night. The countryside stretches out in a peaceful panorama, the patchwork of farms and vineyards, the dark green of olive groves, the pale grey of stone boundary walls, and the distant gleam of the sea on the far horizon, a thin line of silver that separates the green land from the pale blue sky. The mountain Vesuvius stands in its accustomed place, its slopes a soft, fertile green, its summit clear and calm, a wisp of white cloud still clinging to its peak like a bit of sheep's wool caught on a bush. The view is so familiar that you hardly see it anymore. Yet this morning, perhaps because your watch is ending and your mind is loose and receptive, you find yourself appreciating the quiet beauty of the ordinary landscape, the way the light falls on the vineyards, the way the road curves gently around the hill, the way the whole scene seems to breathe with a slow vegetative peace. The sounds of the city continue to grow, layering one upon another in a complex tapestry of morning noise. A group of schoolchildren passes through the street on their way to their lessons, their voices high and chattering, their sandals slapping on the paving stones, their teacher walking behind them with a bundle of wax tablets under her arm. The children do not notice you standing in the shadow of the gate. They are absorbed in their own world of games and whispers and small rivalries, a river of youthful energy that flows down the street and disappears around the corner toward the forum portico where their lessons are held. A few moments later, a man walks past leading a mule loaded with firewood, the split logs stacked high on the animal's back and tied with rough ropes, the man's face half hidden by the bundle he carries on his own shoulder. He nods at you in passing, a quick dip of the chin, and you return the gesture with the same economy of motion, two workers acknowledging each other in the brief space between their separate duties. The mule's hooves clop steadily on the stone, the sound receding into the general murmur, and the street is briefly empty again before the next passerby fills it. You take a moment to check your gear out of habit, running your hands over your belt, your cloak pin, your sandal straps, making sure everything is secure and in order. Your fingers find the small tear in the hem of your tunic that you noticed earlier in the night, a loose thread that will need mending, and you make a mental note to borrow a needle from the barracks supply before you sleep. Your cloak is dusty along the lower edge where it has brushed against the stone, and you shake it out with a few quick snaps of the fabric. Watching the dust motes dance in the slanting sunlight, the morning air is warming now, the sun's heat beginning to soak into the paving stones and the walls, and you loosen your cloak slightly, letting it hang more open across your shoulders, the cool air still pleasant on your chest, but no longer necessary to hold the warmth close. You notice that the public fountain, whose murmur has been your constant companion through the night, is now surrounded by activity. Two women stand beside the basin with large clay water jars balanced on their shoulders. Their voices are low, rhythmic exchange as they fill their jars one after the other, the water splashing and gurgling as it pours from the bronze lion's head spout. A third woman waits her turn, her jar at her feet, her hands resting on her hips, her gaze drifting idly down the street toward the forum. Near her, a small boy attempts to catch the overflowing water in his cupped hands, laughing when it spills through his fingers and splashes onto his tunic, and his mother, one of the women at the spout, calls out to him without turning around, her voice sharp but not unkind. The scene is a small tableau of ordinary life, the kind of moment that will repeat itself 100 times before noon, and you watch it with the detached fondness of someone who has spent the night in solitude and is now gently re-entering the world of human company. The fountain scene eventually disperses, the women hoisting their full jars and walking away in different directions, the boy trailing behind his mother with a last longing look at the splashing water. The basin continues its quiet overflow, the water spilling through the carved notch into the drainage channel, a small steady stream that keeps the gutter clean and provides a drinking source for the stray dogs and cats that roam the streets. You think about how many times you have drunk from that fountain, in the heat of summer afternoons, in the cool of early mornings after your watch, and how the water always tastes the same, cool and clean, a simple gift from the aqueduct that brings it down from the mountains. The fountain is one of those things that is always there, unnoticed and essential, like the gate you guard or the wall you patrol, a piece of infrastructure that holds the city together in quiet, unseen ways. You lean the spear against the wall for what you know will be one of the last times and fold your arms across your chest, feeling the slow beat of your heart beneath the wool of your tunic. Your breathing is deep and even, your body at rest even as you stand, and you let your gaze wander one final time over the street that has been your entire world for the past hours. The paving stones are bright in the morning sun, their worn surfaces gleaming faintly, the ruts of cartwheels catching the light in long dark lines. The stepping stones cast short, sharp shadows that point toward the forum. The shop fronts are all open now, their interiors busy with the small motions of commerce, and the street is alive with the flow of people and animals and carts, the ordinary traffic of a Roman city beginning its day. You have watched this street in darkness and silence, in grey pre-dawn and pale morning, and now you watch it in full daylight. A street that no longer needs your vigilance. A street that has passed safely through the night and into the care of the day. You wait out the final minutes with a calm, steady patience, your eyes occasionally flicking toward the direction of the barracks, your ears tuned for the sound of approaching footsteps that will mean the watch is truly over. The weariness in your body is a familiar friend, the ache in your legs a marker of duty fulfilled, the heaviness behind your eyes, a promise of the deep sleep to come. The temple columns continue to glow in the morning sun, the fountain continues its quiet murmur, the city continues its steady waking, and you stand at the gate, the guard of the third watch, watching the last of the night drain from the sky and the bright ordinary day take its place. Footsteps approach from the direction of the barracks, a sound you recognize immediately even before you turn your head to look. The rhythm of the walk is familiar, a measured and unhurried pace that speaks of a man who has done this same walk many times before, his sandals landing with a flat, even slap on the paving stones that echo softly off the building fronts. You shift your weight and straighten your posture, not out of any need for formality, but simply because the arrival of your relief marks a transition, a small boundary between the long night and the rest that waits beyond it. The footsteps grow louder, and then the figure of the other guard emerges from the grey morning shadows of the side street, a man you have shared watches with for years, his face as familiar to you as the gate itself. He walks toward the gate, adjusting his belt with both hands, the leather strap pulling tight around his waist, the bronze buckle catching a glint of the early sunlight. His tunic is the same plain wool as yours, his sandals the same simple leather, his cloak folded over his arm rather than warm because the morning is already warming. He stifles a yawn with the back of his hand as he approaches, his jaw stretching wide, before he presses his lips together and shakes his head slightly, the small gesture of a man shaking off the last clinging threads of sleep. His hair is slightly mussed on one side, where he has been lying on his cot, and there is a faint crease mark on his cheek from the straw pillow, details you notice without comment, because you have seen them so many times before. He stops a few paces from you and lets his hand fall from his mouth, his eyes still slightly heavy-lidded but alert enough for the duty ahead. You exchange a few quiet words with him, your voice still soft from the long night, his voice still rough from recent sleep. You tell him the gate has been quiet, and he nods slowly, absorbing the information without surprise, because the gate is always quiet, the watch always uneventful, the nights always passing in the same slow, peaceful way it has passed for years. You mention the farmer with the greens who came through the pedestrian door, his donkey cart loaded with fresh turnips and leafy vegetables, and the other cart that followed with the amphory of wine, and your relief nods again, filing the information away in the same methodical way you would if the roles were reversed. You tell him the street sweepers are already at work, that you saw them pass by earlier with their twig brooms, and that the shops are beginning to open, the bakery already busy, the fuller's workshop stirring. He listens without interruption, his gaze moving over the street as you speak, taking in the same details you are describing, his eyes cataloguing the position of the shadows and the flow of the early traffic. The exchange is simple and practical. No ceremony, no formal report, just the smooth transfer of information from one tired set of hands to another, a quiet conversation that ensures nothing is lost between watchers. When you have told him everything worth telling, which is not much because nothing of note has happened, you reach for the spear that has leaned against the wall beside you all night. Your hand finds the worn spot on the shaft automatically, the wood smooth and warm from your palm, and you lift it with the same familiar motion you have used 1,000 times. You hold it out horizontally, the iron head pointing away from both of you, and he reaches out and takes it from your hand, his grip settling into a different worn spot on the same shaft, the place where his own hand has polished the wood over the years. The weight of the spear transfers from you to him, a small shift of balance, and with it transfers the responsibility for the gate, the wall, the pedestrian door, the observation slit, all of it, now his to watch and tend until the next relief arrives. The moment is quiet and without drama, just two men doing a job that has been done in the same way by generations of guards before them. And you feel the subtle release in your shoulders as the duty lifts from you and settles onto him. He takes his place beside the torch bracket, leaning the spear against the wall in the same spot where it has rested all night, and you step back, creating a small distance between yourself and the post you have occupied for so many hours. The gate and the wall and the street now belong to him, and you are just a man standing in the morning light, free to go. You gesture toward the torch, telling him it will need replacing within the hour, and he glances at the flame and nods, already calculating the timing of his own torch replacement ritual. You mention the small tear in the hem of your tunic without knowing why, a trivial detail that surfaces because your mind is loose and drifting now that the watch is over, and he makes a non-committal sound that acknowledges the comment without requiring a response. Then there is nothing more to say, and you turn away from the gate. The act of turning and walking is a small physical release, the change of direction that your body welcomes after hours of facing the same way. You take your first steps away from the Stabian Gate, your sandals finding the familiar path through the now waking city, and you do not look back because there is no need to look back. The gate is in good hands, the city is safe, and your duty is complete. The street before you stretches toward the Forum, its paving stones bright with morning sunlight, its shop fronts open and busy, its gutters running with the clear water from the fountain's overflow. You walk slowly, your pace unhurried, your muscles loosening as you move, the stiffness of the long stand gradually giving way to a pleasant, fluid warmth. The bakery on the corner has its doors wide open, and the smell of fresh bread fills the street so strongly that it seems to have a physical presence, a warm, yeasty cloud that you walk through like a doorway. The baker, a round man with flour on his arms and a smear of dough across his forehead, is standing in the doorway wiping his hands on a cloth. He sees you pass and recognizes you as the night guard, a familiar figure on this morning route, and he reaches inside to a wooden tray that sits on a stone ledge and takes a small roll, still steaming in the cool air. He holds it out to you with a nod, and you accept it with a grateful dip of your chin, your fingers closing around the warm bread, its crust firm and its interior soft. You do not break stride, continuing on your way with the roll cradled in your hand, and the baker turns back to his oven without a word, the transaction so brief and ordinary that it barely qualifies as an interaction. You chew the bread slowly as you walk, the warmth of it spreading through your mouth and down your throat, the taste simple and good, flour and water and salt transformed by fire. The sun's first full rays have spilled over the rooftops and striped the street with long golden rectangles of light that fall between the buildings and stretch across the paving stones. You walk through alternating bands of gold and cool shadow, the warmth touching your face and shoulders, and then retreating, over and over, a rhythm as steady as any you have kept during the night. The light has a morning quality, clear and sharp, the kind of light that makes every detail stand out with almost painful clarity. The cracks in the stones, the veins in the marble columns, the distant figure of a woman hanging laundry on a rooftop line. You pass the fuller's workshop and see the workers inside, their legs moving rhythmically as they tread cloth in the large stone vats, their movements slow and mechanical, their faces blank with the monotony of their task. The sharp chemical smell of the fuller's earth and urine drifts out into the street, cutting through the softer sense of bread and morning air, and you breathe it in without distaste, because it is just another smell of the city, as familiar as the fountain's water or the dust of the streets. The workers do not look up as you pass, and you do not pause, each of you absorbed in your own routine, your own small place in the vast machinery of the waking city. Further along, you pass a wine shop that has just opened, its proprietor rolling out a large clay amphora from the interior and setting it upright in a wooden stand on the street. The amphora is tall and heavy, its surface marked with painted letters that identify the vintage and the estate, and the proprietor grunts with effort as he tilts it into position, his sandals scraping on the stone. A young boy, perhaps his son, stands nearby with a set of smaller clay cups arranged on a tray, ready to offer samples to the first customers of the morning. The proprietor sees you and raises a hand in greeting, a casual wave that you return with a lift of your chin, and then you are past him, the wine shop receding behind you, the sounds of the street closing over the space where you walked. The street that leads from the Stabian Gate to the Forum is one of the main arteries of the city, and it is growing busier with each passing minute. Carts rumble past you in both directions, their drivers calling out to their animals, their wheels grinding over the worn basalt stones, A litter carried by 4 slaves passes on the other side of the street, its curtains drawn, its occupants hidden, its bearers moving with the smooth, synchronized pace of long training. A group of merchants walked together toward the forum, their voices loud with the easy familiarity of men who have worked the same market for years, their arms gesturing as they discuss prices and shipments and the quality of the latest harvest. A dog trots past with its nose to the ground, and a group of children runs by in the opposite direction, their voices high and shrill, their bare feet slapping on the warm stone. The city is fully awake now, and you move through it like a ghost from the night, still carrying the quiet of the dark hours within you. You turn a corner and leave the main street behind, entering a narrower side street that leads toward the forum but by a quieter route. Here the buildings are closer together, their upper stories overhanging the street and blocking the direct sunlight, and the air is cooler and dimmer. The street is paved with smaller, more irregular stones, and there are no stepping stones here, just a narrow channel running down the center where the rainwater flows. A cat sits on a doorstep grooming its paw, and it pauses to watch you pass with the same green-eyed calm as the cat you saw earlier in the night. You wonder briefly if it is the same animal, but there is no way to know, and the question is too small to hold your attention for more than a few steps. You finish the bread roll and brush the last crumbs from your tunic, your hand moving automatically to clean the fabric. The bread has settled in your stomach with a pleasant warmth, and you feel the first stirrings of true hunger now that your body has been reminded of food. You will eat a proper breakfast when you reach the barracks, a bowl of barley porridge with olive oil, perhaps a piece of cheese if there is any left from the previous day's ration, and then you will drink a cup of watered wine and lie down on your cot to sleep. The thought of the cot is a powerful pull now, the promise of horizontal rest after so many hours of standing, and your pace quickens slightly without conscious decision. The side street opens into a small square, a triangular space formed by the intersection of 3 streets, with a public fountain at its center, a smaller version of the one at the gate, its water spilling from a simple stone spout into a round basin. An old man sits on the edge of the basin with his feet dangling, his sandals off, his toes flexing in the cool water. He is a familiar figure, a retired soldier who spends his mornings in this square, and he raises a hand in greeting as you pass. You return the gesture, and he calls out something about the weather, a comment you do not quite catch but acknowledge with a nod, and then you are past the square and into the next street, the old man's voice fading behind you. The barracks is a long, low building near the forum, set back from the street behind a small courtyard. You approach it from the side street and enter through the courtyard gate, an iron grate that stands open during the day. The courtyard is paved with the same dark basalt as the streets, and a single olive tree grows in the center, its trunk gnarled and ancient, its leaves silver-green in the morning light. A stone bench runs along one wall, and a few terracotta pots with herbs sit beside the door, rosemary and thyme, and a small bay laurel, their fragrances mixing in the warm air. You cross the courtyard with the same steps you have taken at the end of every watch for years, your body knowing the way without thought. Inside, the air is cool and dim, the small windows set high in the walls letting in only narrow shafts of sunlight that stripe the floor with pale gold. Several other guards from the night watches are already there, some sleeping on their cots with their blankets pulled up to their chins, their breathing slow and even, their faces slack with rest. Others sit quietly on the edges of their cots, cleaning their gear or mending their tunics or simply staring into the middle distance with the unfocused gaze of men who have been awake all night and are waiting for sleep to claim them. The room has the smell of wool and leather and the faint, pleasant scent of cedar from the chests where the spare gear is stored. You step inside and let the quiet of the barracks settle around you, a different quiet from the one you inhabited all night, a quiet of rest rather than vigilance, of release rather than readiness. You unbuckle your belt and hang it on a wooden peg beside your cot, the leather still warm from your body, the bronze fittings clinking softly against the wood. You unclasp your cloak and fold it over the back of a stool, smoothing the fabric with your hands to remove the wrinkles. Your tunic you will keep on. It is comfortable enough for sleeping, and the morning is not yet hot enough to make wool uncomfortable. You sit on the edge of your cot and let out a long, slow breath, your shoulders dropping, your spine curving into a posture of rest that you have not allowed yourself for the entire night. The cot is a simple wooden frame with a straw mattress, a wool blanket folded at the foot, and a small shelf above it where you keep your spare tunic and your personal possessions, a clay cup, a small knife, a worn leather pouch with a few coins. The mattress rustles softly under your weight, and the sound is one of the sweetest you have ever heard. You sit there for a while in the quiet of the barracks, letting the night drain out of you, letting the stillness of the room replace the stillness of the gate. The other guards pay you no attention, each of them wrapped in their own private transition from duty to rest, and you pay them no attention in return, comfortable in the shared solitude of men who understand each other without speaking. The shafts of sunlight from the high windows move almost imperceptibly across the floor, their edges sharp and clean, and you watch them with the same patience you brought to the stars and the shadows and the slowly lightening sky. The watch is over, the gate is guarded, the city is safe, and you are home or near enough, sitting on your cot, breathing the cool air, feeling the deep and well-earned tiredness that will carry you soon into a dreamless sleep. You reach the guard barracks, a long low building near the forum with small windows set high in the walls, and you step through the doorway into the cool, dim interior that welcomes you like a familiar embrace. The transition from the brightening street to the shadowed room is a relief for your eyes, which have been squinting against the growing daylight, and you pause just inside the threshold to let your vision adjust. The air inside is still and cool, carrying the faint scent of cedar from the storage chests and the softer, earthier smell of old wool and leather and the straw of the mattresses. The room is quiet, not the deep, star-filled quiet of the night watch, but a different kind of quiet, a close, restful hush broken only by the slow breathing of the men already asleep and the occasional rustle of a blanket or the creak of a wooden cot frame. The high windows admit narrow shafts of sunlight that cut through the dimness like golden columns, and dust motes drift slowly within those shafts, tiny specks of light that move in lazy, spiraling patterns. You let the door close behind you with a soft thud of wood against stone, and the sound is absorbed by the room, swallowed into the general calm. You unbuckle your belts with the slow, deliberate movements of a man who's been awake all night and has no need to hurry. The leather is warm from your body heat, and the bronze buckle is smooth under your thumb as you work the tongue free from the hole and slide the strap loose. You coil the belt into a neat loop, a habit so ingrained that your hands do it without conscious instruction, and then you hang it on the wooden peg beside your cot, where it settles with a soft jingle of metal fittings. The peg is smooth and dark from years of use, one of a row of identical pegs set into a long board above the cots, each one holding a guard's belt or cloak, or, in one case, a small leather pouch on a cord. Your own peg is the third from the end, and you could find it in complete darkness by the slight groove your belt has worn into the wood over the years. Next, you unclasp the bronze brooch that fastens your cloak at the right shoulder, a simple disc of metal with a pin that slides smoothly out of its catch, and you slide the heavy wool from your shoulders, folding it once and then twice into a neat rectangle that you place on the stool beside your cot. The cloak smells of the night, of cool air and stone dust, and the faint, clean smoke of the torch, and you know that when you wake you will shake it out and hang it in the sun for an hour to freshen the fabric. You pour water from a large clay jar into a shallow basin that sits on a wooden stand against the wall, the jar heavy and cool, its surface beaded with condensation from the temperature change. The water gurgles softly as it leaves the jar's narrow mouth and splashes into the basin, and the sound is clean and refreshing, a small domestic note after the long hours of torch crackle and fountain murmur. You set the jar back in its place and lean over the basin, cupping your hands to scoop the cool water up to your face. The first splash is a shock of coolness that chases away the last clinging drowsiness from the corners of your mind, and you press the water to your closed eyes, your forehead, your cheeks, feeling the night's thin layer of dust and fatigue wash away and drip back into the basin. You repeat the motion several times, each splash a small renewal, and then you straighten and reach for the rough linen cloth that hangs on a hook beside the basin, pressing it to your face and hands until your skin is dry and tingling. The cloth smells of soapwort, a faint herbal scent, and you hang it back on its hook with the same automatic care you give to all your gear. You sit on the edge of your cot, the straw mattress rustling softly under your weight, the sound a dry, papery whisper that is one of the most comforting sounds you know. The cot is a simple wooden frame with rope lacing that supports the mattress, and it has a slight sag in the middle where your body has shaped it over the years, a shallow depression that fits your back and shoulders perfectly. You let your spine curve into a natural, relaxed posture, no longer the straight, watchful stance of the gate, and you feel the pleasant release of tension in your lower back and between your shoulder blades. The long-held vigilance of the night finally allowed to dissolve. You pull the small loaf of bread the baker gave you from the fold of your cloak where you had tucked it, and you hold it in both hands, feeling its residual warmth, its crust firm and slightly rough, its interior soft and yielding. You tear off a piece and place it in your mouth, chewing slowly, the flavor rich and simple, flour and water and salt and the faint smokiness of the oven. The bread is still fresh enough to be slightly chewy, and you take your time with it, eating in small bites, letting each mouthful settle before you take the next. The act of eating after a night watch is one of the quiet rituals you have come to treasure, a small ordinary pleasure that marks the boundary between duty and rest. Beside your cot, on the small wooden shelf that holds your personal possessions, you reach for your personal flask, a small clay vessel with a narrow neck and a cork stopper, its surface glazed in a simple pattern of brown and cream. You pull the stopper with a soft pop and tilt the flask to your lips, drinking a cup of watered wine that is cool and slightly tart, the wine diluted with water from the same aqueduct that feeds the fountain at the gate. The liquid is refreshing, cutting through the last of the bread's dryness in your mouth, and you take several slow swallows before replacing the stopper and setting the flask back on the shelf. The watered wine is a standard ration for the guards, the small allowance that you look forward to at the end of every watch, and its mild, familiar taste is another anchor in the routine that guides you from the gate to your cot. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and let out a long, quiet exhale, your body feeling heavy but content, the pleasant weight of tiredness settling into your limbs like a blanket. Through the high window, you can see a patch of bright blue sky, a clean, cloudless square of color that seems almost painted against the dark frame of the window opening. The sky is the deep, clear blue of a fair morning, and you watch it for a while without any particular thought, simply receiving the color and the light as you might receive the sound of the fountain or the warmth of the bread. The window is too high to offer a view of the street, but from your cot you can see the very top of a cypress tree that grows in the small courtyard outside, its dark green needles motionless in the still air, a slender spire against the blue. The sight of it is a small pleasure, a reminder that the world outside is green and growing and peaceful, and you let your gaze rest on it until your eyes begin to feel heavy and your focus softens. The barracks room around you is a quiet tableau of rest. On the cot to your left, a guard you have known for years lies on his back, with one arm thrown over his eyes, his breathing deep and regular, his chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of untroubled sleep. His blanket is pulled up to his waist, and his bare feet stick out at the end of the cot, one foot twitching occasionally as if he is dreaming of walking. On the cot to your right, another guard sits propped against the wall with a piece of leather in his hands, a strap that he is oiling with slow, meticulous strokes of a cloth, the smell of the oil sharp and clean in the still air. He does not look up as you settle, and you do not speak to him, the two of you sharing the comfortable silence of men who have spent so many nights together that words are unnecessary. Further down the row of cots, a shape is completely buried under a blanket, only the top of a head visible, the hair dark and tousled, the breathing a soft, whistling snore that is not loud enough to disturb anyone, just a faint rhythmic whisper that blends into the background hush of the room. The scene is one of deep and uncomplicated peace, a room full of men who have done their duty and are now collecting the reward of rest, and you feel yourself being drawn into that same current, your eyelids growing heavier, your thoughts slowing. You listen to the distant hum of the forum coming to life, the sound carrying through the high windows and across the courtyard, a low blended murmur of voices and footsteps, and the occasional rattle of a cart. The forum is the heart of the city, and at this hour it would be filling with merchants setting up their stalls, unrolling awnings, arranging produce on wooden tables, their voices calling out to one another in the easy, familiar tones of daily business. The sound is too distant to distinguish individual words, but the overall tone is cheerful and busy. the sound of a city that is safe and prosperous and going about its ordinary morning. You can pick out the clang of a blacksmith's hammer from somewhere beyond the forum, a regular metallic ring that pauses and then repeats, and the fainter sound of a flute from the direction of the temple, a musician practicing a melody that drifts on the air like a ribbon of sound. These noises are the soundtrack of the waking city, and they filter into the barracks as a gentle, constant presence, a reminder that the world continues even as you withdraw from it into sleep. You bend down and unstrap your sandals, pulling the leather thongs loose and sliding the soles from your feet, the cool air of the room touching your bare skin with a pleasant sensation of freedom. You place the sandals beside your cot, lining them up neatly with the toes pointing outward, a habit of order that you maintain even when you are tired. Your feet are sore in a dull, general way, the ache of standing all night settling into the arches and the heels, and you flex your toes and rotate your ankles slowly, feeling the joints pop and release. The straw of the mattress is lumpy in one spot, and you shift slightly to find the position that cradles your body most comfortably, the ropes beneath the mattress creaking in protest and then settling. You unfold the wool blanket from the foot of the cot and pull it up to your waist, its weight familiar and comforting, its texture slightly rough against your legs. The blanket smells of the same cedar as the storage chests, a scent that you associate with rest and safety and the end of duty. Your eyes grow heavier and you allow them to close, not yet sleeping but simply resting in the darkness behind your lids. A soft, private space where the sounds of the barracks and the forum blend together into a steady, quiet hum. The distant murmur of voices becomes a wordless music, rising and falling in slow, unpredictable patterns, and the blacksmith's hammer punctuates the flow with its regular, metallic heartbeat. The flute from the temple continues its meandering melody, the notes drifting in and out of your awareness like leaves on a slow current. A cart rumbles somewhere closer, perhaps on the street just outside the barracks, its wheels grinding on the basalt stones, and the sound grows louder and then fades, absorbed by the walls and the distance. You are aware of these sounds without attending to them, your mind loosening its grip on the world, your body sinking deeper into the mattress with each slow exhale. You think, without urgency, of the watch you have just completed, the long hours of darkness and stillness, the slow parade of shadows and stars, the farmer with his cart of greens, the cat that crossed the street, the fountain that murmured all night long. These memories are already growing soft at the edges, blurring into the general texture of all the watches you have ever stood, each one distinct, yet each one the same, a long, peaceful river of quiet duty that flows through your life without turbulence or drama. You think of the gate, standing solid and patient in the morning light, and of your relief, leaning the spear against the wall in the spot where you left it, and you feel the satisfaction of a task completed. A small, quiet pride in the simple fact of having been present and watchful through the dark hours. The thought is fleeting, and it drifts away, replaced by a vague, pleasant image of the bakery and the warm bread, the baker's floury hands, the steam rising from the oven, a scene that blurs and dissolves as sleep begins to pull at the edges of your consciousness. The light from the high windows shifts almost imperceptibly, the shafts of sun moving across the floor as the morning progresses, their golden edges touching the foot of your cot and then creeping slowly up toward your blanket. The dust motes continue their slow dance within the light, and the room remains still and quiet. The breathing of the sleeping guards a soft collective rhythm that fills the space with a sense of deep, communal peace. A fly buzzes somewhere near the ceiling, its drone a lazy, intermittent note that rises and falls and eventually fades away. The man on the cot next to yours finishes oiling his leather strap and sets it aside, then stretches out on his back and closes his eyes with a long, tired sigh, and within a few minutes his breathing slows and deepens, joining the chorus of sleepers. You are the last one awake, still floating on the surface of consciousness, still hearing the distant hum of the forum and the faint, sweet notes of the flute, still aware of the warmth of the blanket and the softness of the mattress and the cedar smell of the room. But even as you notice these things, you feel them receding, growing fainter and more distant, like a city seen from a ship that is slowly pulling away from the dock. You stretch out on the cot fully, letting your body go limp and heavy, your arms resting at your sides, your legs straight and relaxed, your head sinking into the small pillow stuffed with straw that rustles softly when you move. The position is one of complete surrender to rest, and you feel the last remaining threads of wakefulness begin to loosen and unravel. The sounds of the morning city continue, a distant, steady hum that is no longer a collection of separate noises, but a single blended note, a low continuous tone that feels almost like silence. The sunlight creeps further across the room, and a warmth touches your cheek, gentle and diffused, a final blessing from the new day before you leave it behind. Your breathing slows to match the rhythm of the men around you, deep and even and unhurried, and your thoughts become less like thoughts and more like images, fragments of dreams that dissolve as quickly as they form. You are a guard, you are a man, you are a body at rest, and then you are none of these things, slipping gently and without effort into a deep, quiet, and completely untroubled sleep, the morning routine complete, the day watch begun, the long, peaceful hours of rest stretching out before you, like a quiet road. Sleep comes to you in the barracks as the city fully wakes, a slow and gentle tide that rises without effort and carries you away from the shores of consciousness into a deep, quiet sea. The transition happens so smoothly that there is no single moment when you can say you fell asleep. Rather, the waking world simply fades, its sounds and sensations growing thinner and more distant until they dissolve into the soft, grey light behind your closed eyelids. The straw mattress cradles your tired body, the wool blanket rests warm across your legs, and the cedar scent of the room wraps around you like a second blanket, familiar and comforting. Your breathing slows to a deep, even rhythm that matches the breathing of the other guards sleeping on their cots around you. A quiet chorus of rest that fills the dim barracks with a sense of profound and untroubled peace. Your dreams are soft and unremarkable, woven from the same simple threads that made up your waking hours. Dreams do not need drama or surprise, not here, not now. And your sleeping mind returns to the gate as naturally as water returns to the sea. In the dream, you are standing at your post beneath the high stone arch, but the dream watch is endless and peaceful, stretched out into a timeless moment when nothing changes and nothing needs to change. The sky above the gate is a deep, velvety black scattered with stars that burn with a steady, silver light, thousands upon thousands of them, more stars than you have ever seen in the waking world, their patterns shifting slowly in ways that feel right, even though they do not match any constellation you know. The stars wheel overhead in their silent, majestic dance, and you watch them with the same calm patience you brought to every real watch, your body still and your mind quiet. You feel the rough stone of the gate arch under your palm, that familiar porous tufa that has been worn smooth in places by generations of hands and rain and wind. In the dream, the stone is neither warm nor cool. It is simply there, solid and enduring, a presence as reliable as your own heartbeat. You run your hand along its surface and feel the tiny pits and grooves, the chisel marks left by a mason who has been dead for longer than anyone can remember, the faint horizontal lines that mark the layers of volcanic ash from which the stone was formed. The sensation is so vivid that it seems more real than the waking world, and you let your fingers trace the same path over and over, a slow, repetitive motion that soothes something deep within you. The torch in its iron bracket flickers without sound, a detail your dreaming mind accepts without question. The flame is a steady tongue of orange and gold that casts long, soft shadows across the paving stones, and though it should crackle and hiss as the oil-soaked rags burn, in the dream it is perfectly silent, a warm living light that dances and sways in a breeze you cannot feel. The shadows it casts are equally silent, shifting and sliding across the stone wall behind the bracket, elongating and contracting in a slow, rhythmic motion that reminds you of breathing. The shadow of the spear you left leaning against the wall is a long, dark line that points toward the street and quivers slightly as the flame moves, a faithful companion even in sleep. You watch the shadow and the flame with an attention that has no urgency. No need to catalogue or remember, just the simple act of seeing. The fountain, whose murmur was your constant companion through the night, continues its gentle song in the dream, but the sound is clearer now, more distinct, each note of the falling water separated from the others, so that you can hear the whole texture of it. The initial splash as the stream strikes the basin, the deeper gurgle of the water receiving itself, The soft trickle of the overflow spilling through the carved notch, and the low, resonant hum of the underground channel carrying the water away beneath the street. The sound loops and repeats without ever becoming tedious, a liquid music that has no beginning and no end, and you feel your breathing synchronize with its rhythm, your chest rising as the water falls and sinking as it flows away. The fountain is a voice that speaks without words, telling the same peaceful story it has told for centuries, a story of continuity and patience and the quiet passage of time. You see the slow drift of clouds across the dream sky, clouds that were not there during the real watch, but have arrived now to add their own soft texture to the scene. They are thin and pale, veils of translucent white that slide across the stars without obscuring them, their edges blurring and reforming in the gentle currents of the upper air. The moon appears from behind one of these clouds, a slender crescent of silver that hangs low over the mountains to the east, and its light touches the top of the gate arch with a pale, luminous glow that seems to come from within the stone itself. The moonlight and the torchlight meet on the paving stones and blend together into a soft golden-silver pool that spreads across the street and laps against the stepping stones like a quiet tide. The cat is there too, the grey tabby that crossed your path during the night, sitting in the exact center of the pool of light, with its tail wrapped around its paws and its green eyes fixed on you with an expression of calm, ancient knowledge. The cat does not move, and neither do you, and the two of you share the dream watch in the same comfortable silence you shared in the waking world. Two creatures awake in a sleeping city, bound by nothing more than the simple fact of your mutual presence. The dream blends all the small sensations of the night into a quiet loop that repeats gently, a soft, circular narrative that has no forward momentum and needs none. A torch crackle that makes no sound. The cool stone under your palm, the slowly lightening sky that never quite reaches dawn. The fountain's patient voice, the cat's unblinking green eyes, your own slow breathing, and then the torch again, the stone again, the sky again. Each element flowing into the next with the seamless ease of water joining water. The loop is not a trap or a labyrinth. It is a garden, a peaceful enclosed space where nothing can intrude and nothing is required of you except to be present, to stand at your post, to watch the quiet street with the same steady patience you have always brought to your duty. In the dream you walk your slow circuit along the wall, your sandals making no sound on the packed earth, the wall rising on your right in its massive, silent solidity. You pass the drainage channel where the fountain overflow runs, a dry groove lined with smooth pebbles that gleam faintly in the starlight, each pebble a tiny, perfect sphere of pale grey. You reach the observation slit and look out at the countryside, which in the dream is not the patchwork of fields and vineyards you know from waking, but a softer, more abstract landscape. A series of gentle, rolling hills that fade into a silver mist, their outlines blurred and dreamy. The mountain Vesuvius rises against the sky, but in the dream it is not a mountain at all. It is a vast, sleeping creature, its flanks covered in a dark green fur of forests, its summit a rounded head pillowed on the clouds, its breathing a deep, subterranean rumble that you feel through the soles of your sandals rather than hear with your ears. The creature is peaceful and benevolent, a guardian of the plain that has watched over the city since before the city existed, and you feel no fear in its presence, only a quiet, instinctive trust that all is as it should be. You turn away from the slit and walk back toward the gate, the torchlight growing from a distant point of orange into a warm, welcoming pool that draws you home. The gate arch looms above you, its stones warm and golden in the combined light of moon and flame, and you resume your place beneath it with the same sense of quiet rightness that you felt when you first took up your post at the beginning of the night. The spear leans against the wall where you left it, and you reach out to touch the worn spot on the shaft, the wood smooth and familiar under your fingers. The iron head catches the torchlight for a brief flash before settling back into its usual quiet darkness, and you let your hand rest on the spear without lifting it, simply maintaining contact with this old companion that has shared so many watches with you. The dream continues its peaceful loop, and time in the dream is not the linear marching time of the waking world, but a circular, eternal present where all moments exist at once. The deep night and the grey pre-dawn and the first golden rays of morning are all folded together into a single luminous now, and you experience them simultaneously. The stars still bright overhead, even as the eastern sky glows with the approaching sun. The torch still burning, even as the daylight makes it pale and ghostly. The silence of midnight still holding, even as the first rooster crows, and the first cart rumbles and the first shop shutters rattle open. The layering of times is not confusing or strange, it is beautiful. A glimpse of the city as it truly is, a place where all the mornings and all the nights and all the quiet watches exist together in a peaceful, eternal harmony. Your sleeping body shifts slightly on the cot, your shoulder pressing deeper into the straw mattress, your hand twitching once and then stilling as the dream settles back into its calm, repetitive rhythm. The other guards continue their own sleep around you, their breathing a soft, collective susurrus that fills the dim room, and the high windows admit the slowly climbing sunlight that will soon touch your blanket and warm your feet. But you are far away from the barracks now, far away from the waking world, deep in the quiet country of sleep, where the gate stands forever and the watch never ends, and everything is calm and still and perfectly at peace. Outside, the Roman morning continues as it always does. A busy, cheerful, ordinary morning in a city that has no inkling of anything other than the routine of the day ahead. Carts rumble to the market with their loads of vegetables and wine and oil, their drivers calling out to one another in the easy, familiar tones of men who have done this same journey 1,000 times. The forum fills with merchants arranging their stalls, unrolling striped awnings against the climbing sun, setting out their wares on wooden tables, bolts of cloth dyed in bright colors, stacks of clay pottery from the workshops near the river, baskets of fresh figs and olives and almonds, live chickens in wooden crates, their clucking a cheerful, chaotic music that rises above the murmur of bargaining voices. The temples receive their first worshippers of the day, men and women in clean white tunics and stolas, carrying small offerings of incense or flowers or coins, their sandals slapping softly on the marble steps, their voices raised in the familiar rhythmic chants that have echoed through these colonnades for generations. School children recite lessons on a portico step, their high, clear voices repeating the lines of Virgil or Homer after their teacher, the ancient words filling the air with a music that is half poetry and half playground chant. The teacher, a thin man with a long beard and ink-stained fingers, taps a rhythm on his wax tablet with a stylus, and the children's voices rise and fall in obedient unison, their bodies fidgeting on the hard stone step, their eyes drifting toward the fountain in the center of the forum where a juggler is practicing his art, with 3 colored balls. The juggler is a young man with a bright scarf tied around his head, and the balls trace lazy arcs in the air, red and yellow and blue, catching the sunlight in flashes of color that make the children gasp and lose their place in the recitation. The teacher claps his hands sharply, and the chanting resumes, but the children's minds are already half lost in the warm golden morning, dreaming of games and adventures and the long free hours that will follow their lessons. The baths open their doors to the first bathers of the day, the furnaces beneath the floors having burned all night to heat the water in the great lead tanks, and steam rises from the coldarium in thick white clouds that drift out through the high windows and dissipate in the morning air. Old men gather in the palestra to exercise with slow, careful movements, their joints creaking, their conversations meandering through the familiar topics of politics and family and the weather. Their voices a low, pleasant drone that blends with the splash of the fountain and the distant ring of the blacksmith's hammer. The bakeries are in full production now, their ovens roaring, their workers pulling tray after tray of golden loaves from the flames, the smell of fresh bread spreading through the streets in a warm, yeasty wave that makes every passerby pause and inhale and think, for just a moment, of breakfast. But you are deep in rest, breathing slow and even, carried by the calm memories of a watch completed. The sounds of the waking city do not reach you here in your quiet corner of the barracks, or if they do, they are transformed by the alchemy of sleep into something softer, a distant harmonious hum that blends with the fountain of your dreams and the silent crackle of the dream torch and the slow, rhythmic whisper of your own breath. You are exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do, which is nothing at all except sleep and dream and let the morning unfold without you. The story stays with you in that small room, playing out its quiet loop behind your closed eyelids, A story that has no conflict and no climax and no resolution because it does not need any of these things. It is a story of stillness and patience, of duty faithfully performed, of the small ordinary details that fill a life with texture and meaning. The gate is guarded by another now, the spear leaning against the wall in the same spot where you left it, the torch burning in its bracket with the same steady flame. Your relief stands beneath the arch, watching the busy street with the same calm attention you brought to the empty darkness. And the morning traffic flows past him in a steady, peaceful stream of carts and donkeys and merchants and children and dogs, all of them safe and unremarkable and exactly as they should be. The sun climbs over the quiet mountain, which is just a mountain, a green and fertile shoulder of the earth dressed in vineyards and olive groves, and the dark, dense foliage of the upland forests. The wisp of white cloud still clings to its summit, dissolving slowly in the growing warmth, and the mountain basks in the golden light with the same patient, ancient calm it has always possessed. It has seen 1,000 cities rise and fall, 1,000 generations of farmers and shepherds and guards go about their quiet lives, and it holds no grudges and makes no demands, simply stands there, solid and silent, a witness to the ordinary miracle of another morning. And the long peaceful hours before dawn, those hours you inhabited with such steady patience, are already fading into the past, where all silent watches go. They will be remembered in fragments, if they are remembered at all, a torch flame bending in a breeze too faint to feel, a cat crossing an empty street, the distant crow of a rooster, the cool stone under your palm, the slow, majestic wheeling of the stars. These fragments will drift through your memory in the days and weeks to come, surfacing at odd moments, triggered by a smell or a sound or a quality of light, and each time they will bring with them a small echo of the peace you felt during those long, quiet hours at the Stabian Gate. They are nothing, these fragments, just the small change of a life lived in routine and duty, but they are also everything, the substance of a world that is good and calm and exactly as it should be. Your dream begins to fade at last, not because the morning demands your attention, but because sleep has run its course and your body has absorbed all the rest it needs for now. The gate and the torch and the fountain dissolve gently, their edges softening, their colors bleeding into the warm darkness behind your eyelids. The cat vanishes, the stars dim, the moon slips behind the mountain, and the dream releases you with the same slow, gentle care with which it gathered you up. You float for a while in the borderland between sleep and waking, that soft grey zone where you are aware of the cot beneath you and the blanket across your legs and the distant hum of the forum. But you are not yet ready to open your eyes or move your limbs or rejoin the bright, busy world outside. You are content to drift, suspended in the quiet aftermath of your long rest, and the room around you is still and peaceful, the other guards still sleeping, the sunlight still moving slowly across the floor, the morning still young and full of promise. And then, with no hurry and no ceremony, you let go of the dream entirely, and it slips away into the depths of memory where all dreams go, leaving behind only a vague sense of peace and the quiet knowledge that the watch is over, the gate is safe, and all is well.